So the year is 2050. You're driving to visit your friend who lives at the other end of the city. Or more likely, you're being driven by your car. It's fully automated, so all you have to do is relax and enjoy the ride. You get bored, so you decide to play a game and start counting delivery drones flying over you. 35, 36, 37. The traffic lights change to white and you know exactly what to do. Yes, traffic lights of the future could have an extra color, white. This artificially intelligent light is supposed to make passing through intersections easier for self-driving vehicles, help traffic flow faster, and reduce fuel consumption. The green light will still mean go. The red light will still say stop. And the white light will be a signal for human drivers and passengers to follow the vehicles in front of them going through the intersection. The self-driven cars won't have to see the white traffic light. They will get data from it wirelessly within a certain range. The system will recommend an optimal speed and give priority to the road with more traffic on it. The white light will activate when there are enough self-driving cars approaching the intersection. The computer will then figure out the most efficient order for them to go or stop. And if this new type of traffic light is introduced before we completely switch to autonomous vehicles, there will still be old cars on the road. When they outnumber the self-driven ones at the intersection, the white light will switch off by itself. Running simulations of the new tech showed that the more self-driven cars there are on the road, the faster the traffic is going. We still don't have the tech to introduce the white light at every intersection, but researchers at North Carolina State University who are behind the idea believe it's possible. It would take money and time, but would also help save money and time in the long run. If you're impressed by the fourth color on the traffic light, imagine augmented reality right in your vehicle. Road signs and traffic alerts will pop up on your windshield like a sci-fi movie. There could also be custom notifications, apps, and entertainment. Looks like you'll never be bored on the highway again. And neither will your car, since it will communicate with others of its kind via a vehicle-to-vehicle or V2V system. Cars will exchange data on speed, location, and safety warnings to make the right driving decisions. Roadworks, although done for your own good and safety, can be pretty frustrating. Well, there might be no need for that with self-repairing roads. Researchers from several British universities have created a concrete blend with tiny capsules full of special bacteria. These capsules come from lakes near volcanoes and can survive for up to 200 years without oxygen and food. They activate their healing superpowers when they come in contact with water, which is the main cause of potholes. After feeding on water, the bacteria produce limestone, which seals up the imperfections on the roads. Tests have shown this brilliant idea actually works. Wow! When this tech goes global, it should reduce road maintenance costs by 50%. It's especially good news for motorists and cyclists, as potholes are a huge danger to them. Now, many highways already have cameras observing them from above, but drivers and self-driving vehicles need to get access to that data. In the not-so-distant future, sensors will be pretty much everywhere, in vehicles, buildings, traffic lights, and even the roads themselves. It's important because even some of the smartest cars may have a limited range of what they see. If they make decisions based on that data, it's no good. So a smart highway with sensors will come to the rescue. Imagine getting real-time information about all the potential obstacles and hazards on the road via fast cellular-based 5G networks. This tech should help minimize the number of road accidents. If an accident does happen on one of the smart highways, artificial intelligence will analyze the data on speed, lane positioning, and nearby vehicles to work out some patterns and algorithms to avoid similar accidents in the future. Since more and more people will use shared autonomous vehicles, the demand for parking spots should go down. And there will be parking lots for autonomous vehicles with electric charging stations and cleaning services. Such parking lots will fit more cars since they won't need elevators or staircases. The owners will just drop the cars off at the entrance. It also means the cars can be parked super tightly. People won't have to open the doors and climb out of the vehicle. Researchers believe that autonomous parking lots could fit 62 to 87% more cars than old-school ones. The only problem is those drivers who won't want to pay for parking and send their self-driving cars cruising endlessly. This could cause robotic gridlocks. Talk about future world problems. Now, if you use public transportation, and it often makes you feel, well, a bit frustrated, you're going to love this one. Trains, buses, ferries, and whatever vehicles we might see in the future will no longer travel on fixed routes or schedules. The number of vehicles will depend on user demand. The idea here is to reduce waiting times and crowds. This system, called Demand Responsive Transport, or DRT for short, is already tested at different locations around the globe. It doesn't always go smoothly, but new tech is supposed to solve all the problems. Apps and mapping algorithms will help you book shuttle minibus rides from floating bus stops near your home and take you where you need to go. Do you sometimes wish you could have bought a different colored car? Well, the great news is that your vehicle might be able to change its looks in the future. BMW presented a concept car that can do just that at the 2023 Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. The car will have 240 panels on it that can change into 32 different colors. You'll be able to choose to change all the panels to one color or set a shade for each panel, turning your car into a kaleidoscope on wheels. The car will also have a windshield with augmented reality, with all the necessary data on the trip and social media updates, which should soothe any FOMO issues. And your prospective vehicle will also express emotions using a combo of headlights and closed kidney grills. I guess if you take good care of it, it will smile all the time. You've definitely seen a flying car in at least one movie about the future, and that future is getting closer. Several companies have been working on it, and Asca is so far the closest to launching it. It's already taking pre-orders for a 4-seater the size of an SUV that can take off vertically and cover distances up to 250 miles at the speed of up to 150 miles per hour. Its manufacturers promise that the flying car will have no problem blending into the city. It doesn't need a lot of space to land and take off and can be parked at regular parking lots. Its engine will use premium gas you can buy at regular gas stations. You'll also need to recharge its battery, either at home or at special charging stations. That beauty can be yours for just $789,000, by the way. Hyundai has its own unique Elevate concept car, which has both wheels and legs. This transformer moves like regular cars can. It can climb stairs to help someone in a wheelchair get inside, fit into a tight parking spot, or climb over obstacles. The bigger idea behind this concept is to give freedom and mobility to those people who don't have it. Elevate can also help in construction work and disaster relief. Just imagine what a great help it could be to rescue teams trying to access areas where usual cars wouldn't be able to pass, like debris or pieces of collapsed buildings. Ah, the future is alive. It's 9:59 a.m. when a man is jolted awake in his bed by a powerful, mysterious force. While he's trying to figure out what's going on, a giant 100-foot-tall column of water is already surging toward his hometown. In 20 minutes, most of his friends and family members will lose their lives when a sky-high wall of water sweeps away buildings, trees, and cars. And it can happen to you at any given time. It's the day after Christmas in 2004. Thousands of tourists from Europe and America are enjoying tropical beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia when a powerful undersea earthquake strikes off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It's a 9.3 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. It triggers one of the largest tsunamis in history, the Boxing Day tsunami, which will take the lives of 230,000 people within a few hours. The city of Banda Aceh in Sumatra, Indonesia, home to 260,000 people, is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. In less than half an hour after the quake, huge 10-story tall waves crash into the city. More than 60,000 people lose their lives immediately. The destruction is so severe that almost no one in its path survives. Next, the tsunami hits Thailand. The waves, rushing at a mind-boggling 500 miles per hour across the Indian Ocean, reach the shores of Phang Nang and Phuket about 90 minutes later. Despite such a significant time gap, both locals and tourists are caught totally off guard. Many beachgoers even walk out onto the beach, curious about the strangely receding sea, only to be overtaken by a towering wall of water. Nearly 5,400 people, including 2,000 foreign tourists, won't survive that day in Thailand. An hour after Thailand, the tsunami hits southeastern India near Chennai. Debris-filled waves push miles inland, taking the lives of more than 10,000 people. Sri Lanka faces even worse devastation. The island will lose over 30,000 people, and hundreds of thousands will become homeless. The tsunami's incredible strength is evident even far away. 8 hours later, it claims its last victims in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. There, rogue waves catch swimmers off guard. Researchers from NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research explain that the destruction was due to the sheer power of the earthquake. It originated from a megathrust fault. That's where heavy ocean plates dive beneath lighter continental plates. These faults are the largest in the world and lie underwater. The 2004 earthquake ruptured a 900-mile stretch of the Indian and Australian plates, 31 miles beneath the seafloor. Plus, instead of one quick jolt, the quake lasted for 10 minutes and released an unimaginable amount of energy. During the shaking, massive sections of the seafloor moved upwards by 130 feet. That's a lot. Such a sudden movement set colossal waves rippling across the ocean. Imagine it like dropping a massive pebble into the water. The thing is, tsunami waves aren't like those surfing waves you may imagine. No, they look like a fast-moving whitewater river that floods everything in its way. If you get caught in those raging waters, it's almost impossible to survive. If the powerful currents don't pull you under, floating debris will. That's the reason why, during earthquakes, there are usually many injuries and fewer lives lost. With tsunamis, it's the opposite. There's way fewer injuries than fatalities because it's too hard to survive. Catastrophic tsunamis like the one in 2004 are rare. That's why India and Sri Lanka had no record of such disasters. This lack of experience, combined with the absence of warning systems, made the consequences of the disaster even more tragic. People didn't feel the earthquake because they were far from the epicenter. And with no natural warning signs, no official alerts, and no history of tsunamis, the waves that hit crowded coastlines had devastating effects. By the way, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth, is where most earthquakes and tsunamis occur. Locally damaging tsunamis strike somewhere in this ocean about once every 1 to 2 years. 76% of the recorded fatal tsunamis happened in the Pacific. And 99% of tsunami casualties are caused by local or regional tsunamis, which occur more often and hit quickly. But then a question arises: could a tsunami as devastating as the Boxing Day one happen again? Unfortunately, the answer isn't very straightforward. A warning system has indeed been established in the Indian Ocean. Its goal is to alert coastal nations of potential tsunamis. But human behavior is still a critical challenge. This became clear during a real-life test in 2012. That's when many residents of Banda Aceh, Indonesia, simply ignored evacuation towers after a tsunami warning. People never seem to learn, huh? The Indian Ocean Warning Network uses undersea pressure sensors placed near tectonic plate fault lines. These sensors detect any changes and transmit data to surface buoys, which then send it via satellite to control centers on land. Authorities analyze the information and decide whether to issue warnings and evacuate at-risk areas. Aceh, located on one of the world's most active fault lines, implemented additional safeguards. They installed sirens in coastal cities, and people get alerts on their cell phones. Plus, there are evacuation towers, reinforced concrete structures capable of holding 500 people. They are special safe zones. Authorities did test how well prepared people were. In 2009, 18 Indian Ocean countries participated in an evacuation drill, simulating a large earthquake. Thousands of coastal communities took part in this drill, and officials concluded that the exercise had been a success. Fast forward to the system's first real test in April 2012. An 8.6 magnitude undersea earthquake west of Aceh triggered tsunami warnings. And even though there were no significant waves, the whole situation revealed critical flaws. Many residents ignored evacuation towers, choosing instead to flee by car or motorbike. This led to citywide traffic jams, with people getting stranded in areas vulnerable to a potential tsunami. It was chaos. Some residents even went back to the beach to look for the signs of a tsunami, which is a life-threatening mistake. So apparently, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to tsunami survival. But what you need to know by heart is the signs of an impending tsunami. First of all, it's severe ground shaking. Strong earthquakes near coastal areas can generate tsunamis. If you notice that water on the beach starts to recede at an alarming rate, exposing the ocean floor, reefs, and stranded fish, run. Then there might be unusual ocean sounds. Keep in mind that a loud roaring noise, resembling a train or jet engine, may accompany an approaching tsunami. If you notice any of these warning signs, do not wait for official evacuation orders. Leave low-lying coastal areas immediately and move to higher ground as fast as possible. If you're at home, make sure your family members know about the tsunami and follow official guidance. You should remember that locally generated tsunamis may strike within minutes. You have to act quickly. If it's a distant tsunami, you may have more time to evacuate. If you don't have an opportunity to move inland, hide in high reinforced concrete buildings. Avoid staying in small buildings or homes in low-lying areas. If you're on a boat, stay offshore. Tsunami activity isn't as dangerous in deep water, so avoid returning to port during a tsunami warning. If you're already in port, check with harbor authorities for guidance. If it's possible to move to deep water, do it in an orderly manner. It may be safer for small boat owners to leave their vessel and move to higher ground. And always prioritize moving to higher ground over saving your belongings. If you live in a coastal area, you can take some measures to protect your property in advance. Since most tsunami waves are under 10 feet, you may consider elevating your house. It can reduce damage. You can also consult an engineer to assess and reinforce your home. And finally, don't forget to protect outbuildings too, and create fences that will allow animals to reach higher ground.
You're standing in the middle of a vast, empty desert in Saudi Arabia. But in the middle of that emptiness, two enormous mirrored skyscrapers rise side by side, in perfect parallel to each other. This isn't just some sci-fi concept, it's the Line, the centerpiece of Saudi Arabia's boldest urban project yet. Now, Saudi Arabia is already home to some of the most ambitious architecture in the world, from Riyadh's King Abdullah Financial District to the iconic Abraj Al Bayt Towers in Mecca. They've been working hard for years. But the Line is in a league of its own. This project was announced in 2021, and it is part of a larger vision for the country's future called NEOM, a $500 billion mega project designed to redefine how people live, work, and interact with the environment. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Well, I don't know. But Nadmi Al Nasser, the longtime chief executive of the ambitious project, has recently departed. Suspicious. Even more so because NEOM's statement issued soon after did not give any plausible reason for his departure. Then, the Line project itself was originally expected to cost around $200 billion. But by 2024, that number had skyrocketed to a mind-blowing $2 trillion. That's about twice Saudi Arabia's entire GDP. And if you ask independent experts, they think it could end up costing even more. At first, the plan was to build about 10 miles of the project and have 1.5 million people living there by 2030. By now, the expectations are way more modest. Only just under 1.5 miles are likely to be done by 2030, with fewer than 300,000 residents. The project has come across a lot of problems along the way. Engineering issues and management problems have caused major delays, and progress hasn't been as fast as hoped. And now, let's figure out what exactly is the Line. It's a literal city made up of 2 parallel skyscrapers, each towering 1,640 feet high. That's higher than almost all the tallest skyscrapers in the world. These skyscrapers are 656 feet wide and stretch for a mind-boggling 106 miles across the northwest of Saudi Arabia, right near the Red Sea. The most astounding thing? The entire city is actually within this one structure. There are no cars, no roads, no emissions. But we'll go into detail a bit later. The complex is supposed to house 9 million people, and all of this running entirely on clean energy. Such a project aligns perfectly with Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 plan. The outside of the skyscrapers will be covered in mirrors that will reflect the surrounding desert landscape, creating an almost seamless blend between the city and its surroundings. Inside, there will be lush parks, cascading waterfalls, flying taxis, and even robot helpers to take care of everyday tasks. They're also planning to make an artificial moon as part of the city's design. One more thing that makes the Line so unique is its design. Unlike traditional cities that spread out horizontally, the Line is vertical. Everything, homes, offices, parks, schools, shopping centers, are stacked on top of each other in layers. This means that residents won't need to travel long distances to get what they need. In fact, the designers promise that all amenities will be within a 5-minute walk from anywhere in the city. And while it's compact in width, the city's vertically layered structure means it can comfortably fit all 9 million residents, while leaving plenty of room for parks, natural spaces, and modern conveniences. There's even a plan for year-round climate control, keeping both indoor and outdoor spaces at comfortable temperatures, no matter how harsh the desert weather gets. Of course, even with everything close by, people will still need to get around the city. Worry not, the Line has it covered in the most futuristic way possible. It features a high-speed train system that will travel from one end of the city to the other in just 20 minutes. That's 106 miles in 20 minutes with only 4 stops along the way. Imagine being able to get anywhere in the city faster than you could drive across town in most places today. Besides the train, the Line will also have autonomous vehicles. Those will be cars and shuttles driving themselves with the help of advanced technology. They will handle everything from parking to going around obstacles. Even cooler, in the Line, every car, train, and any other piece of infrastructure will be connected in a huge network called the Internet of Things. Sensors and real-time data will allow traffic to flow smoothly, preventing delays and reducing congestion. They first spoke about the NEOM project in 2017. Besides the Line, NEOM is supposed to include an octagon-shaped floating industrial city and a posh mountain ski resort. There, Saudi Arabia will host the Asian Winter Games in 2029. Plus, there will be the world's largest green energy plant, which will make the region self-sufficient and sustainable. The goal of NEOM is to attract people from around the world, not just to visit, but to live there. Residents will even be given their own identity, Neomians. Not everyone thinks this construction is a good idea. Some urban planners and architects have pointed out pretty big flaws in the city's straight line layout. You see, in a regular city like Johannesburg, which covers way more ground than the Line, 2 random people are usually only about 20 miles apart. But in the Line, the average distance between 2 random people would be 35 miles. That's almost double, even though the Line's overall area is way smaller. This setup could make it harder for people to connect socially and might be a pain to navigate, even with a high-speed train zipping through it. Now, they promise that every resident will have everything they need within a 5-minute walk, but there are doubts too. people wonder if living in a super compact, stacked-up design might end up feeling claustrophobic, or even too much to handle. As for the whole mirrored exterior idea, it looks pretty cool in renderings. But there's an opinion it could actually mess with the environment. Reflecting all that sunlight in a desert might disturb local wildlife or create unexpected heat issues. The line's high-tech features sound amazing, but they come with their own set of headaches. The city is supposed to run on the Internet of Things tech and autonomous vehicles. Sounds awesome, right? But how are they going to pull that off for a 106-mile-long city? For things to run smoothly, every piece of tech, cars, trains, infrastructure, needs to be perfectly in sync, sharing tons of real-time data. If there's even a tiny glitch, it could throw a wrench into daily life for millions of people. Then there's that high-speed train. It does sound like a dream, but actually building and keeping it running in the middle of a desert is not so easy. The heat, shifting sands, and wear and tear on the tracks could cause big delays and rack up costs pretty quickly. People around the world are questioning if the line is even doable. The first inhabitants were supposed to start living there by 2030, but there are reports about scaling the project back, so that deadline feels like a big stretch. There's also a sustainability issue. The line is supposed to have zero emissions and 100% clean energy. But building something so massive is bound to take tons of resources. With all these challenges, Saudi Arabia is looking into new ways to fund the line and figure out which parts of their Vision 2030 projects to prioritize. An insider has recently said that some projects might go ahead as planned, while others could be delayed or scaled down. This lines up with what Ali Shahabi, who's on NEOM's advisory board, has said. He admitted that the Vision 2030 goals were always meant to be super ambitious. Like, almost too ambitious. But he argued that even if they only pull off part of it in time, it'll still be a big deal.
There's a man in England who bought a couch for his new home, unaware that the furniture would threaten his health and potentially his life. How could that happen? Well, 2 days after the purchase, Andrew Wolfe discovered red marks all over his body. Each time he lay down on his new couch to rest, his condition worsened. It didn't take him long to realize that his new sofa was infested with fleas or bedbugs. Although Andrew bought the couch at a discount, paying only half the original price, his attempt to save money backfired. He ended up incurring expenses for pest control, disposing of various household items, and enduring a frustrating ordeal. The company that sold him the couch agreed to issue a refund, but denied his request for compensation, arguing that he was aware the couch was a returned item and had previously been in another home. Well, if you've ever felt a mysterious sting while lounging on your couch, you might be sharing your space with some unwelcome pests. Sometimes spotting them can be impossible, and the sad news is that they're experts at multiplying. You might wonder why your couch of all places. Well, simply put, it's a cozy haven for them. And if you ever enjoy snacks like chips or popcorn on the couch, let's be real, who doesn't? You're also creating an endless buffet for them. Now, sometimes removing the cushions from the couch and vacuuming all the gaps can solve the problem. But if you have an older couch that's super dirty, just vacuuming it won't do the trick. Bedbugs are mostly active at night, so they could attack you while you sleep. They feed for up to 10 minutes until they get full. The bites look different on everyone, and the reaction can be severe. Remember, these small but fierce critters can survive without food for several months. So, if you're planning to store your furniture in the garage for a while, make sure to give your couch a good cleaning and vacuuming. Then seal it up in a zippered cover. Even if there are bedbugs still hiding inside, they'll eventually kick the bucket without a source of food and won't be able to reproduce. Meanwhile, fleas spend most of their time together in crevices in the walls of your home. Did you know that these little guys remember the dinosaurs? They were around for at least 165 million years. They had to be larger in size and have much larger mouth parts to get through the thick skin of dinos. When they bite, they mostly go for legs and ankles. Then the marks from their shenanigans can stay sore and itchy for a whole week. You won't spot them hopping from crevice to crevice, but you can find their droppings around your couch legs and underneath the couch itself. If you see them, you can try treating them with some salt for a couple of days, or just call a professional. Now, cockroaches prefer to live in the kitchen, but if they see that you've started a free canteen in the living room, they'll make an exception for you. There are so many of them that some surveys say they live in up to 98% of homes in urban areas, mostly unnoticed. They also like to party at night, and if you manage to spot them, you can serve them with a custom treat. Take an empty glass bottle and line the bottom of it with some maple syrup. Put some cooking oil on the top of the bottle. This trap will work like a cockroach magnet, and they'll get stuck in it forever. And then you can decide what to do with a bottle full of bugs. Moths are super sneaky, so you won't see them on your sofa. But you will feel some weird movement if they're inside. They love wool and other natural fibers, but even if your couch isn't that exquisite, they'll still move in there if there are food stains on it. If you see holes in the fabric, webbing around the legs or frame of a sofa, or moth larvae, you'll know they've moved in with you. There are around 160,000 species of moths in the world, and only 150 species that can sting. They really can't bite when they're mature because they grow a long, strong-shaped orifice. But caterpillars don't have that feature and can give you a tough time. And then there's this horror scenario where you lay down and a couch moth just crawls into your ear. It happened to a guy in America who became an internet sensation. He felt the moth near his ear and wanted to smack him, but the insect went inside. His friends helped the guy with a pair of tweezers. It turned out that the moth was 1 inch long and still perfectly fine. So both the guy and the moth got lucky that time. But experts don't recommend using objects to remove the moth. You need to tilt your head to let gravity do the job and lure the moth with some light from the outside. And of course, you need to keep your furniture clean to make it less attractive to those playful creatures. Now, holes in your textiles are one thing, but throwing away all the food from your pantry is like a next-level offense. Pantry moths love to eat dry foods, like cereal, flour, rice, and grains, and they can sneak into your pantry with groceries, pet food, or birdseed that's already infested. When they hatch, they can spread to other food in your pantry. A female pantry moth is super productive and can lay about 400 eggs after mating. When the eggs hatch, the larvae start eating your food and spinning sticky webs. They can even chew through thin cardboard boxes and plastic bags, so closed packages don't always keep them out. You might see their droppings, webs, or even tiny holes in your food packaging. These are obvious signs of an infestation. Pantry moths aren't harmful to people, they're just annoying and ruin food. But some types, like the cinnabar moth, are poisonous. They have bright red and black colors, which warn predators to stay away. If you feel like your pantry might have moths right now, pause the video and inspect it well. Did you find someone who shouldn't be there? Well, try storing your flour, baking mixes, oatmeal, and nuts in the freezer, or at least freeze them for 3 days before moving them back to your pantry. Cold treatment will help you get rid of any larvae that might be present in the foods that you brought home from the store. Now, just to be on the safe side, try this white vinegar and hot water solution I tested myself. Mix them in equal amounts and wipe down your pantry from top to bottom, including both sides of shelves, corners, baseboards, floor, and storage containers. All the moths will urgently go elsewhere. As one final precaution, you can hang sticky fly paper in the pantry. If you add a little bit of fish oil to it, all the moths still hiding in there won't be able to resist the temptation. Now here's a little riddle. What is tiny, has up to 177 pairs of legs, and can scare a 40-year-old man more than any horror movie? Yep, it's a centipede running around your living room. And before you go for the slipper to eliminate the threat, remember, it's your friend. Centipedes can bite, but they hardly ever do it. They don't make nests or webs, they don't transmit anything dangerous, and they don't damage your home or beloved objects. And they work for you, for free, as natural pest control. They eat roaches, flies, termites, moths, and silverfish. So instead of taking their lives, try relocating them outside, where they won't scare you but will keep working hard. If you don't want them to come back, seal any gaps and holes in the foundation, doors, and windows. Fix any leaks and clean up any standing water. Move piles of wood and leaves away from your home. Now, that's a lot of homework, but the result is worth it, trust me. On December 5, 1952, a nauseating yellow-gray fog engulfed London, claiming 12,000 lives. This wasn't mere mist, it stank of rotting eggs and stretched 30 miles wide. Buses halted, planes were grounded, and ambulances were trapped. For 5 days, the city vanished in the stench and sludge. Streets slipped with a black ooze. Those who dared ventured out stumbled blindly, smudging their faces while birds crashed into buildings. With visibility zero, thieves ran rampant, and even indoor shows were canceled. The Great Smoke sent over 100,000 people to hospitals, leaving a grim legacy of demise and decay. The causes of this tragedy started long into the past. Something called pea soup fog became one of the symbols of London in the 19th century. Nature wasn't to blame for this fog. It was caused by people burning coal to heat their homes and run factories. In fact, London's air started getting smoky all the way back in the 13th century, when people began widely using coal. It got worse as the city grew bigger. By the 17th century, people were already complaining about the dirty air. King James I tried to prevent so much coal burning with new laws, but nothing really changed. As more factories popped up during the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century, the problem blew out of proportion. The air was full of tiny particles that water clung to and formed dark, heavy clouds. This mix of smoke and fog became so bad, people called it smog. Yep, this word was invented in London in the early 20th century. The smog got so thick sometimes it could last for a whole week, and it made people ill. Some even passed away because of it. Even though the smog was harmful, people didn't want to stop using coal because it gave them jobs and kept their homes warm. So the problem lingered. By the 20th century, thick fogs were happening less frequently, finally, because factories started moving away from the city. But on that December day in 1952, an anticyclone appeared over London. This meant that the cold air near the ground got trapped under warmer air higher up, like a lid keeping everything underneath. Because of this, all the smoke from factories, cars, and home fireplaces couldn't float up and away like usual. Instead, it clung near the ground, mixed with water in the air, and produced an extremely thick, dirty fog. Plus, daylight in December is shorter, and it was really cold, so people had to use even more coal for heating and lighting than they normally did. All this led to a disaster. It was clear that sulfur particles from the burning coal made the fog yellow and smell like rotten eggs. But scientists couldn't figure out why and how these particles turned into sulfuric acid. Decades later, an international team of researchers recreated that scary fog in a lab. They used samples of air and atmospheric measurements from the fog in 2 large Chinese cities that have high levels of sulfur dioxide in the air, just like London during the Great Smoke. They learned that the thick, dirty air, called haze, doesn't form in the same way in London and in China. In London's fog, smoke from burning coal released 2 gases, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide. These gases mixed with water droplets in the fog, which made it harmless at first because the water diluted the harmful chemicals. But as the water evaporated and there was nothing to dilute the 2 dioxides, the fog became very acidic and hazardous to breathe, so it damaged people's lungs. In present-day China, things are a little different. A third chemical, ammonia, joins the mix. Now ammonia, which comes from farms and cars, helps balance out the acidity of the fog, so it's less harmful than London's deadly fog. But the scientists found that cutting down on nitrogen dioxide and ammonia could still help China reduce its air quality problems. They hope that their discovery will help both understand London's past fogs and give China ideas for making its air cleaner. It could also save the health of millions of people around the world who are now living in cities with bad air quality. After the terrible fog of 1952, everyone realized how serious London's air problem was. 4 years later, the British authorities created a law called the Clean Air Act to stop something like that from happening again. This law banned people from burning smoky fuels like coal in their homes or in factory furnaces in some parts of the city. To help people adjust, the authorities gave them money so that they could switch to cleaner heating options like oil, natural gas, or electricity. It took time for these changes to make a big difference, and sadly, another dangerous smog happened in 1962. But the Clean Air Act was a very important first step for protecting the environment and people's health. Almost a century before the Great Smoke, another smelly event happened to London, the Great Stink. Back then, people didn't have proper bathrooms or sewers, and all the waste from houses and factories went straight into the River Thames. When the weather got super hot in July and August, the water level in the river went down, and piles of waste, sometimes 6 feet, popped up on the muddy banks. The smell was so terrible that even Queen Victoria and Prince Albert had to cancel their relaxing boat ride on the river. The politicians working in the brand new Parliament buildings, which were right by the river, couldn't handle the smell either. The air inside was so terrible that they had to hold handkerchiefs over their noses to breathe. They even tried soaking the curtains in chloride of lime, hoping it would cover up the horrible odor. Many Londoners believe that the bad air, called miasma, caused horrible things like cholera, which had already taken the lives of lots of people. Engineer Joseph Bazalgette solved the problem as he built a new sewer system that would move all the waste away from the city. His sewer system was so well designed that it still works today, even though London has grown to over 8 million people. On the other side of the Atlantic, in the United States, there was also a day when you couldn't see your hand before your face, and it was impossible to breathe outside. But the reasons for this Black Sunday were very different from the Great Smoke of London. In 1931, it almost completely stopped raining in the southern Great Plains. This drought lasted for nearly 10 years. Without rain, the farms dried up and the soil turned to dust. Strong winds blew this dry dirt into the air and created huge dust storms. These storms, called black blizzards, made it hard to breathe and see anything. People tried to protect themselves by putting Vaseline in their noses, wearing masks, and sealing their homes, but the dust still made many of them sick. In 1934, things got even worse. It was the driest year in over 1,000 years. Temperatures went over 100 degrees for weeks, and the land became even drier. On April 14, 1935, after months of terrible weather, the sky finally looked clear, and there was barely any wind, which was rare for this area. People came outside as they were hoping that the worst was finally over. When Oklahoma minister announced that a few good rainstorms would make the land fertile again. But unfortunately, that morning, a cold wind from Canada met warm air in the Dakotas and started a massive dust storm. The storm grew to hundreds of miles wide and thousands of feet tall. A sunny day instantly became completely dark. Drivers had to hide in their cars, and other people went down into basements, found refuge in barns, fire stations, tornado shelters, and under their beds to stay safe. The storm didn't stop for hours and took at least 20 lives. Many people couldn't stop coughing, and one man went blind. The storm was so strong, it carried 300,000 tons of dirt across the country and even reached the East Coast. Welcome to the Spirit of Discovery cruise ship, which will take you on an unforgettable sea voyage around the Canary Islands. The azure endless ocean, delicious food, the highest service, premium cabins, and a terrible nightmare that you will probably remember for the rest of your life. This is exactly how one luxury trip of the Saga Cruises Company ended last year. Instead of relaxing during the cruise, passengers felt fear and horror, and even had health problems. And that's why. On October 24th, the Spirit of Discovery liner started a 2-week cruise around the Canary Islands. There were about 1,500 people on board, About 1,000 were passengers, and the rest were crew members. The first week went great, but then the liner encountered a serious problem called nature. There were strong winds and big waves. The captain decided to return to the UK ahead of time, but the decision was made too late. The ship was caught in a severe storm in the Bay of Biscay. A powerful wind with a force of 11 points hit the vessel. To make it easier for you to understand, the 11-point wind is able to tear out trees together with roots, destroy residential buildings, and plunge entire cities into chaos. Such a storm is rare, but Spirit of Discovery was unlucky enough to get into its epicenter. 11 points is the penultimate place on the Beaufort scale, which determines the wind rating. The most powerful storm has 12 points, and this is a hurricane. The wind reached a speed of 65 miles per hour, which is about the same as the average speed of a car on a highway. Not only did it push the Spirit of Discovery, but it also raised huge waves 25 feet high. Just imagine a wall of water the height of a 3-story building collapsing on a lone ocean liner. At that moment, the captain sent a message to all the passengers through the cabin speakers so that no one left their place. And his voice sounded worried enough. All the passengers had to lie down and hold on tight. According to the witnesses' words, the ship remained caught in the storm for about 15 hours. They held on with all their might so as not to crash into the walls and floor. All this time, tables were flying around the ship, dishes were breaking, furniture was moving all over the cabins. The waves smashed windows, partitions, and doors. Some people were knocked down because they couldn't hold on for so long. The storm hurled the passengers from ceiling to floor, from wall to wall. The ship's crew turned the dining room into a medical area to provide assistance to those who had been hurt. Despite the difficult and terrible conditions, the ship's team did a great job. They regularly informed passengers about the current situation and tried to calm everyone down. There was no panic and chaos on board. When the storm finally ended, the ship continued its journey and finally reached land, where medics urgently evacuated 8 passengers to the hospital. One of them was never able to survive this storm. It's good the ship didn't meet a rogue wave during the storm. This is a natural phenomenon that can appear during a storm and even in still water. It's a giant wave with a height of 60 feet. Like a 6-story house, it collapses onto a ship with incredible speed and capsizes it. And then the wave suddenly disappears. This is no joke. A similar wave has been recorded in the Gulf Stream off of Charleston, South Carolina. It's scary to get in its way. Now, let's go back to the past to remember one of the most terrible maritime tragedies. No, we're not talking about the Titanic. We'll talk about the Greek liner Laconia, which set sail from the English port of Southampton on December 19, 1963, with more than 600 people on board. However, just 3 days later, a terrible tragedy happened to the ship in the boundless waters of the Atlantic. At 11 p.m., in the barbershop hall, an electrical malfunction occurred. The problem led to a fire, which quickly spread to other rooms. The crew couldn't cope with it, since the fire was spreading too fast. The ship's team turned on the fire alarm, but there was no command to leave the vessel. Only 2 hours later, the captain ordered the passengers to evacuate. All this time, people were either relaxing in their cabins or enjoying a party in the ballroom. The crew was probably trying to put out the fire without causing panic. However, when the situation became critical, the evacuation began. People panicked and ran to the lifeboats, but many didn't manage to get inside. One of them was John Morris. He survived this catastrophe and shared his memories of how he put his family in a lifeboat while he stayed on board the ship. He didn't even have a life jacket. Since there was nowhere to go, the ship's crew opened a bar so that people could relax a little. However, at that moment, boilers began to explode inside the ship, and it became clear the vessel wouldn't stay afloat for too long. John Morris decided to jump into the water right in his tuxedo. As soon as he was overboard, he grabbed onto a piece of wooden deck cargo and swam as far away from the ship as he could. The giant liner could sink at any moment, and when such a huge object goes down to the seabed, it forms a water funnel that pulls along everything around. Rescuers arrived at the scene sometime later. Fortunately, John Morris's pregnant wife and young son were alive, but his mother-in-law unfortunately didn't survive the disaster, like many other people that day. Of course, after this incident, the Greek Ministry of Merchant Marine initiated a thorough investigation. For 2 years, they collected information from passengers and the captain, studied the technical characteristics of the ship, and eventually came to certain conclusions. According to them, the ship's crew gave the evacuation order too late. Not all passengers were able to get into lifeboats, but half of those boats remained on board because of the chaos that prevailed during the evacuation. Several officers of the liner were accused of negligence, but the captain and his first mate received the most criticism. As for John Morris, he stated that he felt himself under protection that day. Another unusual story happened on a cruise ship relatively recently. Spoiler alert, the ship didn't sink, there was no evacuation, and the weather was good. However, for many passengers, this journey became a real challenge. Imagine that you've been working for a long time and saving up money to go on your dream trip on the Celebrity Mercury cruise ship in the Caribbean. You arrive in South Carolina, from where the ship begins its journey. You get on board, looking forward to a week's rest. At first, everything is fine. People are having fun, chefs are cooking delicious dishes, and beautiful daytime landscapes turn into night parties. But then suddenly, many passengers start throwing up. Someone is in a hurry to go to the toilet, and someone stays and vomits right in the halls. The cruise turns into chaos. More and more people feel terrible because of unknown poisoning. You also visited the restaurant and eaten seafood, but fortunately, the disease has avoided you, which can't be said for more than 400 other passengers. Almost every 1 in 4 people on board face gastrointestinal problems. There were almost 2,000 people, and a quarter of them are in bad condition. Crew members do endless cleaning. They wash the deck, give people nausea pills, and ask them not to leave the cabin till the illness passes. The captain sends several samples ashore to determine what caused the poisoning. Unfortunately, the cruise is already ruined, and all the passengers have unpleasant memories. So the company organizing the trip issues certificates that can be used on future cruises. It's not the most pleasant experience, but it's still better than nothing. Now, imagine if, instead of just feeling sick, people got infected with some kind of bacterium that would turn them into zombies. It would be much more exciting and scary. Now, do you think you could survive on such a ship full of zombies? And how would you do that? Tell me about it in the comments. The first guy crazy enough to try flying in anything electric was a French dude, like 140 years ago. The main problem back then, batteries weren't exactly long-lasting or powerful. Apple, Tesla, Samsung, modern batteries last ages. Well, not really. Even the biggest electric car battery couldn't keep a plane in the air, not for long anyway. Right now, 1 pound of airplane fuel has almost 60 times more energy than a regular battery. They would need to make the fuel tank 60 times bigger and fill it with batteries. But batteries are heavy, so you'd need to make the electric airplane more powerful to handle the weight. So then you'd need even more batteries, which would mean more weight. So you'd need to make an even stronger… you get the picture. But engineers are trying to find a balance. In 1973, 2 of them put an electric engine on a glider, and it flew for 14 minutes. Not really long enough to fly anywhere, but it was still the first manned electric aircraft flight ever. A few years later, one stayed in the air for 35 minutes. Its electric engine had only 3.5 horsepower, and its battery was borrowed from a Hughes 500 helicopter. The roof of the airplane had solar panels on it, but how much charge are you going to get in 35 minutes? Things are a lot easier when you're talking about pilotless planes. Mostly, they're just way lighter. No human, no chair, no doors or extra windows, zippo. NASA's Pathfinder set a world record for an altitude of 71,000 feet. No jet engines, no fuel, just a pretty strong battery. In 1990, the Sunseeker 1 crossed the entire United States with an electric engine. It took 21 flights and 121 hours in the air. Most normal commercial planes do it in one go, and it only takes about 5 hours. After that, tech started getting way better. Time for the Solar Impulse. What a great name for a band. The wingspan of this giant was about the same as the Airbus A380, the largest passenger aircraft in the world. But its total weight was basically the same as an SUV. They put massive wings on it and loaded them up with solar panels. This time they really did recharge the plane as it flew around. It could stay in the air for an incredibly long time and travel huge distances. As part of its round-the-world trip, it spent almost 5 days in the air and traveled over 4,000 miles between Japan and Hawaii. Aloha! Why did it take 5 days? Because that thing only goes 45 miles per hour. That's like your grandma driving on the highway. My grandma has a lead foot. And you can't just build a plane. First, you need to pass through a tough certification process. Every screw, nut, bolt, every inch of your new plane needs to be tested for safety. That takes years. So many dreamers have gone another way. They take an existing aircraft, throw away the old gas-burning engine, and switch it out for an electric one. Electric engines are much lighter and they take up less space. But those heavy batteries more than make up for it. These upgraded planes can take off, but can only fly short distances, which is amazing. Jet planes emit about 1 billion tons of CO2 a year. They're a major player in the pollution game. But half of all flights in the world are less than 500 miles long. It's one thing to get a giant plane in the air to travel from New York to Paris, but it's totally different if you only need to fly New York to DC or Seattle to Vancouver. They're only a few hundred miles, but they use some of the same planes. It's crazy. They literally take off, gain the right altitude, and immediately begin their descent. That's like driving to your own mailbox in a tank. Each hour in the air costs the airlines thousands and pumps a bunch of CO2 into the atmosphere. So let's do it. Step 1. Replace the fuel-munching planes with electric ones. It'll be cheaper for everyone, quieter, and cleaner. Done. Just one problem. Electric planes can only take 1 to 2 passengers at a time. That's the pilot and co-pilot. The way forward? Build an electric plane from scratch. Eviation Alice. It might just be the first fully electric commercial aircraft, carrying 9 passengers and 2 crew members. It looks kind of like an overturned boat and has 3 propellers, 2 on the wings and 1 behind its V-shaped tail. As long as a school bus, as wide as a limo. Its secret? It's almost twice as light as a school bus. That helps the engines work less and means longer flights. It's made of composite materials, which is science talk for stuff that's not metal, basically what some boats are made of. And its batteries take up 60% of its weight. They're everywhere, in the wings, tail, beak, eyes, feathers, just kidding. Alice has a max range of 650 miles. That's like LA to Vegas and back. And then back to Vegas one more time. Its cruising speed is only 275 miles per hour, much slower than fuel-powered planes. But the main advantage of Alice is money. 1 hour in the air costs the airline $200. That's way cheaper than even those tiny planes that millionaires use to fly to Cabo for the weekend. So what's aviation waiting for? Mostly it needs infrastructure. But that might not be such a big problem. There are almost 20,000 airports in the USA. Most of them are unused because they're just too expensive to run or because no airline wanted to bother flying there anymore. But Alice is much cheaper to maintain and it makes a lot less noise. Imagine the airport of the future, small, stylish, quiet, and clean. Engineers want to charge Alice with mobile chargers, like an electric version of those gas trucks you see at the airport. For a 1-hour flight, Alice needs to juice up for 30 minutes. That's actually not that bad.
But imagine if you were going to take a 14-hour flight on that thing. You'd be waiting at the gate for 7 hours. Alice costs $800 less per hour than other planes. But the plane itself is pretty expensive. Try $4 million. Still, that's only a bit more than one of those private jets. Alice is getting ready for a 2022 fully certified flight. That means it's only a few years before regional flights go electric, at least some of them. But if electric planes want to play in the big leagues, they need to solve that same old problem, their batteries. Modern lithium-ion batteries have serious issues. They're flammable, they lose their charge faster and faster, the more you recharge them, and the cold makes them not work as well. The next generation of batteries is lithium-sulfur batteries. They hold more power and are cleaner for the environment. But their main disadvantage is that they wear out quickly. So scientists are looking for other tech to step up. Hybrid planes might be the way of the future. That's what cars are doing more and more now. Part fuel, part battery. Airplanes will probably be the same. There are already lightweight two-seater planes that use a hybrid engine. The aircraft takes off quietly with the energy stored in its batteries. Once it's up in the air, it changes to fuel. Some engines actually charge the battery while it's working, sort of like your car battery. Electric planes aren't the only way forward. Some companies are working on biofuel planes, which run on hydro-something-something veggie oil. But those planes are also pretty small. Probably the next big thing to hit the airline industry will be driverless planes. Computers already do a ton of the heavy lifting, and if you fly long distance, most of it's on autopilot already. Even though it's so freaky to think that there's no one up there flying your plane, most problems are caused by human error. So, no human, no errors? Most customers say they don't like the idea, but that'll probably change soon enough. Ooh, I wonder if they're gonna make AI robot cabin crew. Or what if tiny drones flew around the cabin serving drinks?
Time can stretch or shrink depending on where you are. Climb to the top of an extremely high mountain, and time will pass a teeny tiny bit faster than if you were down in a valley. That's all because of gravity and how it affects time. We hardly notice it in our everyday life, but for scientists and space agencies preparing to send people to the moon, these minuscule differences in time really do matter. We'll get to answer the why question a bit later. Right now, a new space race is underway. Many countries want to establish long-term bases on the moon. With humans up there, things like reliable timekeeping become crucial. The thing is, the moon doesn't operate on Earth's time. A day on the moon runs slightly faster than a day on Earth. The difference is about 56 microseconds, and it seems insignificant. But over time, even such a difference can add up, creating bigger issues. So, to keep lunar missions running smoothly and prevent things from drifting out of sync, NASA and scientists around the world are now dealing with a tricky challenge, creating an entirely new lunar timescale. NASA is supposed to start using it by 2026. It's the same year they hope to send astronauts back to the moon for the first time in 50 years. But this new timescale is not just a moon time zone. It's actually an entire system that will adjust for the moon's faster time and keep everything synchronized with Earth's time systems. Only in this case will missions be able to run smoothly. You see, on Earth our timekeeping is already surprisingly complicated. It might seem like time should be a straightforward concept, but keeping accurate time is actually a precise science, especially when you consider how much timekeeping affects our daily lives. So, to keep global time coordinated, scientists rely on something called Coordinated Universal Time, also known as UTC. This global time standard is based on ultra-precise atomic clocks that scientists place in separate locations all over the world. Atomic clocks are cool because they measure time based on the consistent vibrations of atoms, so they're super stable and accurate. This helps scientists make sure UTC is the same for everyone everywhere. These atomic clocks also take into account that time moves slightly more slowly the closer you are to the center of our planet. So, atomic clocks positioned closer to the Earth's surface tick a bit more slowly due to stronger gravitational pull. This effect, explained by Einstein's theory of relativity, happens because gravity affects time. By spreading atomic clocks across different elevations, scientists average out all the tiny time differences caused by gravity. Also, for precise timekeeping, scientists occasionally add leap seconds to account for the small natural changes in Earth's rotation speed. It sounds pretty technical, but this process of keeping everyone on the same time helps make the modern world function. After all, precise timing is crucial for global trading, GPS navigation, and even internet communications. But time on the Moon works differently. Our natural satellite has a weaker gravitational field than Earth. That's why clocks on the Moon tick a bit faster. This difference means that lunar clocks are very likely to slowly drift away from Earth clocks if there's no correction. It can lead to big problems when astronauts need to keep in close contact with Earth or navigate around the lunar surface. NASA's solution is something called a lunar timescale. Scientists aren't going to adjust moon clocks to match Earth exactly. Instead, they want to establish a unique system that measures lunar time accurately, but is also easy to convert back to Earth time. Think of it as creating a whole new framework just for the Moon. To make this lunar time system work, NASA is cooperating with international colleagues like the European Space Agency. Together, they're setting up what they call LunaNet. This lunar network will be a bit like the Internet for the Moon. It'll make sure all the lunar clocks work together and align with Earth-based time. Just like how atomic clocks around the world coordinate for UTC on Earth, clocks on the Moon will be part of this larger LunaNet network. Now, scientists are pretty experienced when it comes to managing time in space. Global Positioning System satellites, which orbit Earth about 12,550 miles high, have atomic clocks on board. These clocks tick faster than clocks on the Earth's surface because they're quite far away from Earth's gravitational pull. But then, how does GPS navigation stay accurate? It's because scientists have figured out ways to slow those clocks down to match Earth's time. This experience with GPS clocks is a great base for what scientists need to do on the Moon. In some ways, it might be even easier than managing GPS. Scientists can work with lunar clocks as they naturally are, instead of needing to adjust them to sync perfectly with Earth. By setting up accurate lunar time from the start, scientists hope to avoid some of the complications of managing GPS satellites. And now, here's the interesting part, or maybe more interesting. To keep lunar timekeeping a reality, NASA and its partners want to set up clocks both on the lunar surface and on satellites orbiting the Moon. Some of these clocks will be long-lasting atomic clocks, and others will be crystal oscillators. Those offer stability over short time periods. Together, these clocks will create a network that scientists will be able to rely on. Meanwhile, atomic clocks for space don't come cheap. They can cost a staggering few $1,000,000 each. Luckily, crystal oscillators are more affordable, but they don't stay accurate over long periods. Once those clocks are set up, they'll work together as part of LunaNet, which will be NASA's framework for everything related to moon-based time and data networks. LunaNet will act like an internet for lunar operations. Different space agencies will contribute to it, like how internet service providers work for us on Earth. But there's another set of challenges, and it's connected with the Moon's rotation. Firstly, a day on the Moon lasts much longer than a day on our planet because it takes the Moon about 28 Earth days to make a full rotation. Plus, the Moon's equator experiences about 14 days of sunlight, followed by 14 days of darkness, unlike Earth's regular day-night cycle. And at the Moon's south pole, where NASA is going to establish future lunar missions, there are areas that stay lit or in shadow permanently. It might make it harder for astronauts to keep track of time. NASA and its partners hope to involve more countries in this project through international organizations like the International Astronomical Union. The idea is to get as many countries as possible on board with the lunar timescale, so that everyone exploring the Moon is on the same page. Now, another really exciting thing about all this is that figuring out lunar time could help other future space missions, like trips to Mars. The experience and knowledge we'll get from setting up a lunar timescale are likely to serve as a blueprint for managing time on even farther planets. That's one of the reasons why scientists are taking this lunar project so seriously. As for astronauts living on the Moon, a consistent, reliable time system will be essential, not just for navigation, but for everything from scientific experiments to day-to-day activities. NASA's Lunar Time Project is truly groundbreaking. It's the first step toward managing time as humans expand farther into space. And if they get it right, it'll mean that future astronauts won't just have Earth time to guide them. They'll also have a Moon time, and even, one day, a Mars time too. Precise timekeeping matters both for the sake of scientifically understanding the passage of time on the Moon and for setting up all the infrastructure necessary to carry out missions. Scientists are also eager to create a timescale from scratch because they can take everything they've learned about timekeeping on Earth and apply it to a new system on the Moon. Well, I'm out of time, so bye! Phoenix. This sizzling gem in the Sonoran Desert isn't just another American city. It's more like a giant oven where you can throw a party, as long as you don't forget the ice. Seriously, if you find yourself here in the summer, brace yourself for some serious heat. We're talking about temperatures that regularly pass 100 degrees. And in 2024, Phoenix hit 110 degrees 55 times during the summer, tying the record set just the year before. Now, I get it if you're not a fan of hot weather, but apparently a lot of people love living in a sauna. Phoenix ranks as the 5th largest city in the United States, and it is the capital and most populous city in Arizona, with 1.7 million residents as of 2024. And if we're talking about the metropolitan area, also known as the Valley of the Sun, the population is almost 5 million. Yet, good luck finding someone actually born here. Out of every 4 Phoenix residents, 3 were born somewhere else. Believe it or not, Phoenix wasn't always this bustling, crowded place. It became one. A few decades ago, it was just a sleepy little dot on the map. Back in the 1940s, the population was around 65,000. It wasn't even close to cracking the top 100 list of the largest U.S. cities. Now, at that time, Phoenix was mostly an agricultural hub, and its economy revolved around what they called the 5 C's: cotton, citrus, cattle, climate, and copper. But things really started to change in the 1950s thanks to one life-changing invention. Drumroll please? The air conditioner. Actually, it was the portable version that came out in 1945, created by an American inventor named Robert Sherman. Phoenix residents owe a lot to Robert for making life bearable during scorching summers. Before AC, people in Phoenix would literally move their beds outside and build sleeping porches. They'd protect that kind of outdoorsy space with light curtains or some kind of net to keep the dust and bugs out. Fun. Anyway, the point is that the air conditioner played a big part in making Phoenix an easier place to live. Since the 1940s, this city in Arizona has transformed from a dusty little town into a sprawling urban jungle, and it's still one of the top 10 fastest-growing metro areas in the U.S. The best part is, it looks like that won't change anytime soon, since this 519-square-mile metropolis is surrounded by rolling desert, with plenty of room to keep growing as far as the eye can see. So, who's dropping everything to move to Phoenix? Well, Californians are the city's biggest fans. According to a recent survey, a third of all new renters moving to Phoenix come from Los Angeles. Okay, that survey might not be the most reliable since it only applies to the source's clients, but it does line up with U.S. Census Bureau data from 2019, which says that 70,000 Californians moved to Arizona in the previous year. The connection between Phoenix and LA is so strong that some people even call Phoenix the next LA. You've got to give Phoenix credit for capitalizing on its proximity to Southern California. The city offers lower taxes, fewer regulations, and lower costs of living, which makes it a magnet for businesses, especially in high-tech and service industries. So, in the 90s, Phoenix was considered a non-stop generator of jobs. In the last few years, we've seen the number of jobs only go up, and the unemployment rate has dropped by nearly half, going from 6.3 in January 2014 to 3.4 in the same month in 2024. Now, when it comes to big city problems, you can't avoid talking about traffic. But here's another reason why Phoenix is a dream city. It doesn't even come close to the traffic nightmares you find in places like LA. Estimates show that people in Los Angeles waste about 119 hours a year just sitting in traffic. But in Phoenix, it's more like 61 hours. Huge difference, huh? And let's not even start talking about the money people waste just sitting in traffic. In LA, drivers burn through about $2,440 worth of gas per year. In Phoenix, they waste 25 gallons of fuel, which ends up costing about $952. Yeah, that's still a lot of cash, but compared to LA, come on, that's a steal. Phoenix being okay in terms of traffic might have a lot to do with how the city was designed. Just take a look at a map of Phoenix. You'll notice it looks like someone took a ruler and drew perfectly straight lines for the roads. That's because the city was laid out in a grid system. This setup makes it so much easier to get around, especially compared to cities full of confusing twists, U-turns, and one-way streets. It just simplifies things, whether you're a local or a tourist. Plus, Phoenix has nice wide streets. Most cities have one major road and a bunch of narrow streets that just can't handle heavy traffic. But Phoenix has wide roads everywhere. So, when the freeways get jammed, you can just hop onto a parallel street and still get to work without stressing out too much. When you look at all the job opportunities and the relatively smooth traffic, it's no wonder people are willing to put up with the heat and move to Phoenix. But don't get it twisted, the heat is no joke. It is really, really hot and sunny out there. We're talking about 300 days of sunshine on average, or about 85% daylight hours per year. But once again, Phoenix has made the best of it. And all that constant sunshine has turned Phoenix into one of the top solar energy cities in the country. Now, you may be wondering, a city in the middle of the desert with barely any rain, do they actually have enough water? Well, they do. Phoenix has its water situation pretty well sorted out, thanks to multiple sources. I mean, they don't rely on rain alone, which is a good thing because, desert life. Most of their water comes from way up north and east of the valley, where snow melts off the mountains and flows into giant reservoirs, storing it up for those dry years. But most of Phoenix's water comes from the Salt River Project, which brings water through canals and pipelines from the Salt and Verde rivers. Then there is the Central Arizona Project, which transports water all the way from the Colorado River. They even get a bit of water from underground wells. And Phoenix doesn't want to waste a drop, so they're smart about recycling, reusing treated water to keep parks green, and even recharging their groundwater. Since Phoenix is all about sunny skies nearly every day of the year, it's normal that people can get a little moody when it actually rains. But here's the thing. Phoenix always gets a surprise up its sleeve, even when it comes to bad weather. When it rains in the deserts, locals get treated to this unique earthy smell. It's thanks to the creosote bush, a desert plant that releases an amazing fragrance when the rain hits it. People describe it as the smell of rain, and honestly, it's one of those fresh, clean scents that makes you forget you're in the desert for a second. And if you've never stopped to think about why Phoenix is called Phoenix, well, it's based on that famous legend of the bird that rises from the ashes. Now, after knowing all the special things about this city and its unique ability to turn challenges into advantages, we can say the name couldn't have been better chosen. So get this, Taylor Swift takes a flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo that leaves at 10 a.m. on February 20th. She's on the plane for 12 hours, but she lands only at 2 p.m. the next day in Tokyo. That's a 28-hour difference. So, how did this time warp happen? Well, it's all because of this wonky line. This is the International Date Line. That imaginary line that slices the globe in half and decides who gets to celebrate the new year first? It's the Line Islands, by the way. But crossing this line doesn't just make you feel like you've stepped into a transporter. It actually changes your day. Cross from east to west and boom, it's 24 hours later. If you travel in the opposite direction, crossing the line from the western side to the eastern side, you go back an entire calendar day. Now, you'd think that the international dateline would be a nice, neat, straight line in the ocean where the time zones switch. But in reality, it's as if someone took a ruler and said, let's make this complicated. The line zigzags all over the place, wrapping around islands and causing all sorts of head-scratching confusion. For instance, Big Diomede Island and Little Diomede Island are only 2.5 miles apart but have a 21-hour time difference. And things can get a little more complicated depending on which time zone a country follows. For example, if you travel 659 miles across the dateline from Baker Island to Tokelau, you must add 25 hours. In other words, that's 1 day and 1 hour. And if that doesn't sound weird enough for you, wait, it gets crazier. When it's 6 o'clock in the morning on Thursday in New York, it's still Wednesday night in American Samoa. Meanwhile, over in Kiribati, it's already Friday. Yep, we're talking about 3 different calendar days happening at the same time because of this one imaginary crazy line. This phenomenon occurs every day between 10 o'clock and 10:59 in the morning. So, why does the international dateline look so ridiculous in the first place? Well, great question. Although these zigzags may seem completely arbitrary, they actually have a logical basis. It's pretty much a made-up concept based on the Earth's rotation. The Earth is always spinning, thank goodness, and it takes about 24 hours, or a day, to complete one full rotation. To keep things in sync, people took the Earth and divided it into 24 time zones, each 15 degrees apart. But what is the starting point for a day on Earth? Well, basically, people needed to figure out which of these 24 zones or lines would be the starting line, or the chronocenter. They needed a reference point, a line where they could begin adding or subtracting time as you move east or west. That line is what we now call the prime meridian. But here's the catch. Deciding where to put this starting line, the prime meridian, is totally arbitrary. The idea of establishing a line where days begin and end goes all the way back to at least the 1300s. Back then, map makers were doing their own thing, picking their own east-west dividing lines called meridians, which, by the way, is just a fancy Latin word for midday. Without a universal standard for when a day officially started or ended, sailors on long voyages just had to wing it, figuring out how to handle the time they were gaining or losing along the way. So, in 1884, people decided to organize this whole mess. 25 nations gathered at the prestigious International Meridian Conference in the United States with one big goal: to decide on a line that would serve as the official prime meridian. Finally, like it or not, they were determined to create the international dateline that the whole world would accept and would follow from that point forward. The prime meridian was established in Greenwich, England, and the international dateline was placed on the opposite side, running through the 180th meridian. Well, sounds simple, right? But that's when the nightmare really began. The chosen international dateline didn't just wander through uninhabited areas. Oh no! It split some countries in half and created all sorts of chaos. I mean, if you divide the world with a completely straight vertical line, you end up with situations where half of a country is 1 day ahead and the other half is 1 day behind. Take Kiribati, for example. The country is primarily centered in the Gilbert Islands, which sits just west of the international dateline. However, in 1979, their territory got a little bigger with the Phoenix and Line Islands, which are way east of the dateline. Suddenly, Kiribati was straddling the international dateline. This created a bit of a headache for businesses. Folks on either side could only communicate by radio or phone for 4 weekdays a week. Now, to fix this quirky situation, Kiribati decided to skip Saturday, December 31st, 1994, right off the calendar. So Friday, December 30th, turned into Sunday, January 1st, 1995. And just like that, New Year's Day came a day early. Woohoo! After that, the dateline moved eastward to go around the entire country. So the same thing that happened to Kiribati happened to other countries as well. For example, when they got to the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, yep, the line made another detour to include them. And when they got south of the equator, well, guess what? Another eastward bend to cover even more islands. And that's pretty much why the straight line started to get a bit ziggy-zaggy. This wonky line is designed to avoid land as much as possible, so there's less hassle when it comes to changing days. So, no, you can't stand between the international date line, like having one foot in one day and the other in the next. But you can cross it by boat. In fact, some fancy trans-Pacific cruises even offer a time travel package for adventurous travelers who want to cross the line and jump into the future. Now, in the end, the international date line looks this ridiculous because it was constructed based on a series of arbitrary decisions, historical quirks, and a whole lot of confusion. But it's not just because people organized it in the 19th century that there is no confusion regarding time zones today. Another thing that the prime meridian establishes is Coordinated Universal Time, the famous UTC. Now, UTC never changes for daylight savings time or anything else. However, in 1908, Canada decided to spice things up by creating Daylight Saving Time, or DST. Their idea was to set the clocks 1 hour ahead of Standard Time to make better use of sunlight in the spring and summer and fall evenings. The idea was so brilliant that most countries jumped on board, but not everyone. Just look at Nepal. They have never ever used the Daylight Savings Time, which means their clocks do not change throughout the entire year. As you probably know, countries with large territories often have more than one time zone. Just like the United States, which has 11 time zones. Australia has 9, while India is a special case. Look, India is a big country with an area that stretches around 1,800 miles from west to east. So it should have 3 time zones in total, but they only have one. This means that the sun rises almost 90 minutes earlier in Dong in the Far East than in Gujarmoti in the West. And why do they have only one time zone? Well, basically, because they can. Just remember that the international dateline and time zones are invisible, artificial, and now you know, totally arbitrary. So if a country wants to stick with just one time zone to simplify processes and business operations within its border, then hey, why not? At the time, nobody knew it was Steve Jobs' last public appearance. He spoke in front of the Cupertino City Council just 4 months before he passed away. And there, he presented the new Apple Park campus project. Now, back in the 90s, Apple built its first campus and called it Infinite Loop. The entire place was set up in a ring around a looped road, named after the programming thing where a code runs on repeat forever. Cool, huh? Anyway, it was fine for a while, but as Apple kept growing, they simply ran out of room. So they began grabbing more buildings around the area. Eventually, it turned into this messy setup of mismatched offices that didn't work together at all. Instead of ditching Infinite Loop, Apple decided to keep it and build a huge modern campus nearby. They got lucky with a giant plot of land right next to Interstate 280. This highway cuts through Silicon Valley, so it would be super easy for people to get to work. That land once belonged to Hewlett-Packard, but since this company was downsizing, they decided to sell and Apple jumped on it. Interestingly, Jobs worked at Hewlett-Packard as a teenager, which made the land acquisition personally significant for him. To create their dream campus, Apple brought in a big-name architect, Norman Foster, and his design studio. The idea was to make one giant building big enough to fit 12,000 people. That's why the main building of the campus is a massive ring with a focus on collaboration. The creators wanted to ensure that workers from different departments could meet frequently in shared spaces. A major feature of the building is the use of giant curved glass panels. They provide awesome panoramic views and an overall sense of openness. The ring-shaped building is surrounded by tons of parkland. Inside, it's divided into 9 sections, connected by bright, open atriums. And it's all wrapped in a continuous wall of floor-to-ceiling glass, so you get a full view of the green space outside from anywhere inside the ring. The setup inside is also different. It's one huge open space where people can sit wherever they want, like in a co-working space or on a college campus. The whole idea is to get people to work together more easily. Surprisingly, or not, after all, introverts do exist, not everyone is on board with this open layout. Some Apple employees, especially programmers, say it's actually hard to concentrate with all the open space and noise. Now, even though that massive circular building is incredible, it still doesn't have enough room for everyone at Apple. So they've been adding extra buildings nearby. But the new ones aren't as crazy cool in design as the main building. To keep things running smoothly, Apple also set up a private shuttle system to get employees through the traffic-heavy streets of Silicon Valley. Apple Park wasn't simply expensive to build. It was next-level expensive, reportedly costing around $5 billion in total. When you break that down, it comes out to about $1,785 per square foot, or a surprising $12.40 per square inch. That's because almost everything in Apple Park was custom-made and thoroughly designed. How about we take a closer look at what went into some of the major structures? The main building, also known as the spaceship, is the heart of Apple Park and the most recognizable construction. The main ring-shaped structure is huge, measuring a full mile in circumference. The building itself is famous for its over 3,000 custom-made curved glass panels, which form the continuous glass walls. And here's how much all that beauty cost Apple. Then there's Steve Jobs Theater. This venue is a special addition to the campus, created in memory of Apple's founder Steve Jobs. It spans 160,000 square feet and seats up to 1,000 people. This makes it perfect for Apple's famous product launches and other events. The theater's lobby alone cost about $12 million to build. Architect Norman Foster designed it so that only the elegant all-glass lobby is visible from the outside. This pavilion is supported entirely by glass with no columns, which makes it the largest structure in the world to be fully supported by glass. The architect wanted the construction to look like a jewel nestled in the park. The entire theater sits underground and opens into a stunning 20-foot-tall glass cylinder. The cylinder is capped by one of the world's largest carbon fiber roofs. And here's how much the entire theater cost. The visitor center at Apple Park was designed so that even the general public could get a small taste of the Apple Park experience. This building includes a guest reception area, a display zone where visitors can check out Apple's products, and a cafe. There's also an additional 2 million square feet of parking here, which cost around $26 million to construct. Well, at least it ensures plenty of space for visitors. The Visitor Center even offers an exclusive Apple Store with merchandise that's only available at this location, along with an augmented reality tour of the campus. It's as cool as it sounds and gives people a virtual look at what it's like inside Apple Park. The construction of the Visitor Center wasn't cheap either. Now, Apple takes employee well-being seriously, and the campus includes a massive 100,000 square foot fitness and wellness center with state-of-the-art facilities. This isn't just your basic gym. It's got multiple gyms, a 2-story yoga studio, and even meditation rooms for mental wellness. There are also facilities for team sports, physical therapy spaces, and even on-site medical and dental services. It seems there's everything to make sure employees have the support they need to stay healthy and active. It all comes with a hefty price tag, though. Apple Park doesn't just look futuristic. It's also designed to be super eco-friendly. But before we dwell on that, let's take a look at Apple's giant data center in Reno, Nevada. This data center powers services like Siri, iCloud, Apple Music, and Apple Pay. The complex is made up of 5 huge white buildings, connected by a long central corridor, and holds more than 200,000 servers. To keep everything running and cooled, this data center is fully powered by 100% green energy from 3 Apple-owned solar farms. And it's not just the Reno data center. Apple has announced that all its facilities, from the Apple Park headquarters to its distribution centers and retail stores worldwide, now run on 100% renewable energy. Apple Park itself is part of this commitment. 17 megawatts of solar panels cover its roof, making it one of the largest renewable energy installations of its kind globally. At the moment, this 100% green energy goal covers only Apple's direct operations and doesn't yet include its suppliers. But the company has already convinced a few dozen of its key suppliers to commit to using 100% renewable energy for the parts of their business that serve Apple. But probably the coolest thing of them all is that Apple Park was engineered to handle California's earthquake risks. The building relies on a technology called base isolation. It essentially places the whole structure on 692 large steel saucers 2 stories underground. In the event of an earthquake, the saucers allow the building to slide up to 4 feet in any direction, so the whole construction remains stable and protected. This floating design helps the structure withstand even severe tremors, keeping everyone and everything inside safe. Now, unlike campuses like Google's, Apple Park is actually closed to the public. Luckily, there's the visitor center we talked about. At the moment, it's likely the only way outsiders can experience the vibe of Apple Park without needing an employee badge. In every sense, Apple Park is much more than just an office space. Its unique design, cutting-edge technology, and commitment to sustainability reflect Apple's brand and values. For Apple, this isn't just about making a workplace. It's about creating a high-tech, eco-friendly environment that shows off the company's obsession with quality, design, and perfection. Sandy Island is a creepy landmass that appeared on world maps for nearly 200 years before vanishing into thin air. Located in the South Pacific between Australia and New Caledonia, this phantom island was first documented by explorers in the 18th century and continued to pop up on maps and even scientific surveys. But when a research ship sailed through its supposed coordinates in 2012, they found nothing but open water. They even measured the ocean depth at this spot, and it was always more than 4,000 feet deep, so there was no chance of a big piece of land could be hiding under the water. To make things even weirder, when you look up its exact coordinates on Google Earth, you'll still see a faint outline of what looks like a long, thin island, but with no landmass in sight. Theories about its disappearance talk about possible cartography errors, but the mystery of how a whole island fooled the world for centuries is still unsolved. Now, speaking of mysterious islands, let's dive into the enigma of Hashima Island. Located off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, this small island was once a bustling coal mining facility, thriving with workers and families. But as the demand for coal declined, the island was abandoned in the 1970s, leaving behind a haunting ghost town. Today, Hashima stands eerily silent, with crumbling concrete buildings and overgrown vegetation. And if you are brave enough, you can do a virtual tour using Google Earth. But there are other places where digital maps won't let you see much, like the Ward Islands in Australia. If you search for its coordinates, you'll notice a bunch of blackout spots near the coast. This has led to all sorts of wild speculation online, sparking curiosity about what might be hidden beneath the surface. I mean, is it just a glitch, or could there really be some unusual wildlife down there? Well, we still don't have concrete answers for these obscured areas, but it is worth mentioning that this region is part of a wilderness protection area. This place is an important zone for the Australian sea lion and the New Zealand fur seal, for example. So, these blackout spots could be just part of a plan to keep everything private and protected out there. From creepy islands to abandoned places, if you ever find yourself driving through Rio de Janeiro, you might catch a glimpse of something unsettling – a group of creepy Santas, faded candy canes, and rusty slides surrounded by palm trees and dense greenery. This is Park Aba Noel, an eerie, abandoned Christmas-themed amusement park in Brazil. The park's creator had big dreams, thinking it would become a massive, eclectic attraction with different themed areas. We're talking about a space the size of 460 football fields. Work started in 2000, but the place shut down a few years later after the creator tragically passed away in a car accident just meters from the park's entrance. Today, the attractions are slowly being taken over by rust. This totally feels like something out of a sci-fi movie, but those multicolored rings are actually right here on Earth, in Yellowstone National Park to be exact. At 370 feet in diameter, it is the largest hot spring in the United States and the third largest in the world. When you see it from above, the different colors come from various types of bacteria that act like real-life thermographic filters. Each type of bacteria thrives at different temperatures, and their colors reflect the heat levels in different parts of the spring. Our next stop is in Italy, where you can find the Villa de Vecchi, also known as the Red House or the Ghost Mansion. For every ghost mansion, there's an urban legend behind it. Now, while nothing we're about to say is confirmed, the tale is still pretty interesting and downright bizarre. Built in the mid-19th century by Count Felix de Vecchi, this once grand summer residence quickly became the site of tragedy. The Count's wife passed away under mysterious circumstances, and his daughter disappeared, never to be seen again. Devastated, the Count is said to have spent his remaining days searching for answers. Over the years, the mansion fell into ruin, with local legends adding to its haunted reputation. Some claim to hear strange noises or see ghostly figures, while others whisper about unusual rituals that might have taken place there. Though crumbling and overgrown, Villa de Vecchi remains popular for those intrigued by its eerie history. While we've explored eerie and abandoned human-made structures, let's take a look at a place where nature's forces left their own massive mark: the meteor crater in Arizona. The site was formed in an instant about 50,000 years ago, when a large iron-nickel meteorite slammed into Earth. Measuring just under a mile wide and 560 feet deep, the crater is one of the best-preserved impact sites in the world. Standing at its edge, you can almost picture the incredible force of the impact, wiping out everything around it. Today, the meteor crater is a fascinating geological landmark, drawing in scientists and curious visitors. From a Google Earth point of view, this area in Niger looks creepy, and what seems to be clusters of glass domes dotting the landscape, almost like an interplanetary colony. But in reality, it's kind of an illusion. Those domes are actually small semicircular pits, and they're part of the Just Dig It project. Can you dig it? These pits, known as water buns or earth smiles, are dug to capture rainwater and restore dry, degraded land. It's a simple but genius method that helps bring life back to areas suffering from desertification. By trapping water, these buns allow vegetation to grow again, cooling the land and reviving ecosystems. Now, you have probably heard of the famous Nazca lines in Peru, right? We're talking about those massive ancient geoglyphs carved into the desert, which have shapes like a spider, a monkey, and a hummingbird. Well, recently, something similar popped up, and it's got the internet buzzing. This new figure, located at the top of a mountain, looks a lot like a wild boar. While it's super cool to find a potential new geoglyph, the lack of solid info and the not-so-sharp edges make us think it's just a natural formation. It's still pretty intriguing, though. But if you head down south to Chile, that's where you'll actually find a real geoglyph. We're talking about the Atacama Giant, which is around 390 feet tall. What looks like a funny drawing seems to represent some sort of spiritual figure or deity. There's no solid proof of what it actually means, but experts believe this design might have worked as an early astronomical calendar. The points on the top and sides of the head are said to indicate the seasons based on how they align with the moon. Meanwhile, you might also find some mysterious shipwrecks while exploring Google Earth, like the MV Plassey in Ireland. This ship met its tragic fate back in 1960, when a heavy storm and strong winds blew it ashore at Finnis Rock, tearing a hole in the vessel's bottom. Water started rushing in from underneath. After some shouting and running in all directions, the crew managed to get out of the ship. Today, the vessel's remains are still at Finnis Rock and have become a popular attraction. You can still see its hull, which keeps falling apart over time, making the whole scene even creepier. And we've also got something interesting involving the Titanic. Now, it's true that the ship is really 13,000 feet underwater, so you actually can't see it with satellite cameras. But if you type these coordinates into Google Earth, you'll find the spot of the Titanic accident. It's not that creepy of a place. I mean, it's really just a huge expanse of blue. But still, it's pretty interesting to get the big picture of how they seem so far from everything on that tragic night when the ship went down.
One interesting thing that happens in map design is the so-called Baltimore phenomenon, or Baltimore effect. This phenomenon happens when a city or another object is left off a map because there's just not enough space, while smaller cities make the cut simply because there's room for them. The name comes from Baltimore, Maryland, which often gets left out of maps because it's surrounded by bigger cities like Washington, D.C. But on the flip side, sometimes smaller and less well-known cities like Alice Springs in Australia end up on the same map simply because there's enough space for them. Like at this scale, Alice Springs, which give or take 25,000 inhabitants, is labeled, but the huge city of Guangzhou, with over 14 million people, is somehow not. This phenomenon is more common on automated mapping sites, but it doesn't happen at every zoom level. On popular sites like Google Maps and other similar ones, you'll only start seeing Baltimore show up at certain zoom levels, like the 5th, 6th, or 7th zoom. Cartographers can tweak their maps to make sure they're useful and convey spatial information effectively, finding the right balance between showing important details and keeping the map clear and focused. The best maps are the ones that show key elements clearly, while still accurately representing the world. But Alice Springs is not the only weird thing on the map of Australia. Look at the time zone map. This 10.5 section looks a bit off, huh? Well, Australia is officially divided into 3 standard time zones: Western, Central, and Eastern. Australian Central Time aligns with UTC plus 9:30, with individual states and territories deciding whether to observe daylight savings time. Australian island territories and Antarctic stations contribute to the complexity of the time zones. Despite this, Australian time zones are generally easy to understand. In addition to the official time zones, there is an unofficial hybrid time zone called Australian Central Western Standard Time. This time zone is halfway between Western Time, UTC plus 8, and Central Time, UTC plus 9:30, making it UTC plus 8:45, a unique quarter-hour difference. Australian Central Western Standard Time is only observed in a small area in far southeastern Western Australia, along the Eyre Highway. The Australian Central Western Standard Time area includes settlements such as Cocklebiddie, Madura, Mundrabilla, Eucla, and Border Village. Only a few hundred people live in this region, making it easier for them to agree on a non-standard time zone. Despite the lack of official approval, Australian Central Western Standard Time continues to be followed due to the significant time gap between Western and Central time zones, especially during the summer when South Australia observes daylight saving time and Western Australia does not. The use of this unique time zone can often lead to confusion, even amongst the locals. Eucla Police, for example, operate on Perth's time zone, causing occasional tardiness to events such as community gatherings. Locals mentioned that in the past, Eucla operated on its own unofficial time, which made things simpler, before the transition to align with Perth time. They also face confusion as their location in South Australia does not observe daylight savings. The history of the Australian Central Western Standard Time dates back to the establishment of a telegraph station in Eucla in 1877. Although the exact origins of this time zone are unclear, it is speculated that it was adopted to avoid confusion at the telegraph station located on the border between Western Australia and South Australia. UTC plus 9:45 was historically utilized in Australia as a time zone known as Central Western Daylight Time. Certain roadhouses along the Eyre Highway in South Australia and Western Australia adopted UTC plus 9:45 during the summer months when South Australia observed daylight savings time. While not officially recognized by the authorities, the boundaries of this time zone are clearly outlined and often depicted on local road maps. 5 locations in Australia, including Border Village, Kagoona, Eucla, Madura, and Mundrabilla, previously observed UTC plus 9:45. Currently, these areas operate on UTC plus 8:45 due to Western Australia's lack of daylight savings time. Australia is not the only example of weird time zones. China has a population of approximately 1.5 billion people, and it's the 3rd largest country in the world. Despite its vast size, China operates on a single time zone known as Beijing Time, or China Standard Time. This unique time zone covers almost 5 geographical time zones within the country. At times, in some cities in China, the sun rises as late as 10 a.m. People often have lunch after 2 p.m., or even after 4 p.m. if they're not in a hurry. Since 1991, daylight savings time has not been observed in China. However, the region of Xinjiang, located in the western part of the country, follows Xinjiang time, which is 2 hours behind China Standard Time, and is considered an unofficial time zone. Nepal also has its unique time zone, as it operates on Nepal time all year round, without the use of daylight savings time. It's a bit unique compared to other countries because it has a UTC offset of plus 5:45, meaning that Nepali clocks are 5 hours and 45 minutes ahead of Coordinated Universal Time. This is only a 15-minute difference from neighboring India, where the standard time used to be the same until Nepal decided to set its own time zone in 1956. Now, let's examine the map of Europe. Great Britain, Portugal, and Spain are all located at roughly the same latitude. However, despite this, it's 1 hour earlier in Portugal and the UK compared to Spain. Why is this the case? In the 1940s, Spain was instructed to switch to German time, a directive that was accepted by Spanish authorities. Over time, despite changes in leadership, Spain remained in the same time zone, resulting in it being 1 hour behind its neighboring countries at the same latitude. But like many other countries, Spain sticks to daylight savings time. Greenland would rank as the world's 12th largest country if it were independent, but it's currently part of Denmark. The country has 3 different time zones. Most of it is 3 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time, except for only one town on the eastern coast, which is 2 hours ahead. Thule Air Base in the northwest operates on GMT-4, while the tiny population of Danmarkshavn sticks to GMT. Daylight savings time was implemented to give us more daylight during the evenings after work, which could help save energy by lowering the need for lights and heat. It was first suggested by Benjamin Franklin in 1784 to align waking hours with daylight and conserve energy, and was implemented in Port Arthur, Ontario in 1906. Since then, many countries have adopted the practice, though some regions near the equator or at high latitudes opt out due to minimal variations in daylight hours. In the United States, daylight savings time is observed almost everywhere, except in Hawaii and Arizona. Arizona's scorching hot weather makes daylight saving time kind of pointless. People there would rather get stuff done in the cool morning hours than sweat it out in the evenings. However, the Navajo Nation, which is autonomous Native American territory, sticks to the same daylight savings time schedule as the rest of the country. Even though it spans 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, they keep the time consistent across their lands. As for Hawaii, due to its tropical location, the amount of sunlight doesn't change much throughout the year. If Hawaii changed its time zone to UTC-9 during daylight savings time, the sun would rise at around 7 a.m. in June. This is because most of the islands are situated towards the west of the Hawaii-Aleutian time zone, and theoretically should be in the next time zone to the west. In the past, Hawaiian Standard Time was based on a different longitude than it is now.
Hey there! Quick question, what is the capital of Japan? If you said Tokyo, then you got it right. Tokyo is one of the most modern and colorful cities in Japan. But for over 1,000 years, Kyoto occupied that place. Yeah, I know, the names are similar, but while Tokyo is the futuristic center of Japan, Kyoto is one of the most traditional and historical cities in Japan. It's known as Japan's cultural capital. Let's play a game of Spot the Difference. Here are two photos. The first one is from Tokyo, and the second one is from Kyoto. Can you tell what is the main difference between both? Hold that thought for one more second. Here are two more pictures. The first one is from Asakusa, a neighborhood in Tokyo, while the second one is from Kyoto. What would you say is the main difference here? Well, you can probably guess where I'm headed. If you didn't figure it out, I'll spell it out for you. The main difference is in the colors. If you've ever had a chance to travel around a bit, you probably noticed how cities have certain color themes. Like Rome is terracotta, and Paris varies in tones of gray and sepia. Looking at these images, one can see that Tokyo is bright, electric, and looks even a bit chaotic. And Kyoto is monochromatic and gives the impression of being calmer and more peaceful. It's fascinating to see that what causes this distinction between both cities has to do with a certain landscape law. You see, in 2007, Kyoto passed a new law prohibiting colorful street signs. The law also wanted to standardize overall constructions to make the city look more homogeneous. Since Kyoto was Japan's capital city for such an extended period of time, it was built using traditional feng shui architecture and principles. That's why so many of the buildings have that traditional Asian shape to them, the one with the curvy ceiling, like you see in the Mulan movie. Sure, this style is very far from what modern architects are doing today. If you take a look at Tokyo, you'd see glass skyscrapers rather than these old buildings. But that's all part of a bigger plan, set in motion by something called the Miyako Landscape Guidelines. The municipality's main argument to pass the law was that Kyoto was losing its unique landscape due to Japan's modernization. If Kyoto were to follow in Japan's footsteps and build humongous skyscrapers, citizens would lose their view of the three mountains that surround the city. And let's face it, nobody would want that to happen. Plus, it's nice that you can go to different cities in Japan and notice that they are unique in their own way. If the landscape law was to be effective in all of Japan, we wouldn't get to see architectural marvels such as the Tokyo Sky Tree and the Asahi Flame Building. Now take a look at the Akihabara district in Tokyo. It is known as one of Japan's most modern neighborhoods. It's filled with top-notch technology at every corner. And yes, it's also filled with signs everywhere. If we compare it with Kyoto after the passing of the new law, the first thing that would have to go are the rooftop signs. Oh, and flashing and moving lights are also illegal there now. This Kyoto Starbucks also illustrates what I'm talking about. If you were strolling along the bucolic streets of Kyoto's countryside, searching for a place to get a cappuccino, you'd miss this coffee shop completely. I think we can agree that the traditional Starbucks logo was made to call attention, with that crowned siren-like creature supported by a very green background. In other places in Japan, it still looks like this. But in Kyoto, the brand went above and beyond to respect the new guidelines and produced this beautiful wooden logo and a little plaque that says this building has lattes. Yes, indeed. There are multiple examples like this. In Kyoto, the 7-Eleven doesn't have its traditional red, orange, and green stripes. Its logo was changed to black and white. You can think that's dull, but I think we can agree to disagree. It looks perfect when you look at its surroundings. Oh, and what about McDonald's, the world's most famous burger franchise? It kept its yellow logo, but took the red out of the background. In terms of the color palette allowed, the law uses the Munsell color system to determine which chroma levels are acceptable. Usually, the faded version of strong colors like red, black, green, and so on are accepted. Now, imagine if they adopted a Wes Anderson palette. It would look like a toy city, that's for sure. At first, vendors and shopkeepers felt disturbed by the new law. They didn't understand why they had to change their branding for the sake of some aesthetic the city was trying to preserve. But with time, they not only came to terms with the new law, but could already see the benefits of it for their brand success. You see, this helped turn Kyoto into an even bigger tourist attraction. Tourists felt like they were traveling in time, sort of. Some tourists even like to dress up in traditional kimonos and walk around like geishas. The municipality also began an award system to compensate the shops and brands that had done their homework well. Of course, the camouflage Starbucks won an award back in 2018, as did Sagawa, a major delivery company in Japan, back in 2012. It's not only shops that needed to adjust to the new guidelines. Things such as vending machines and post offices also needed to be toned down. Again, the idea is to make the city more visually coherent, and they sure help. Now, what happens if you don't follow the rules? Well, the people who chose to ignore the landscape law can spend up to 1 year in jail or pay a huge fine. We can also compare the differences inside Kyoto itself. Around the city center, the landscape law is less strict, so you'll find taller buildings and even bigger and more colorful signs. But as you leave the center and move towards smaller cities in the countryside, the law is much more strict. It's especially strict around the UNESCO heritage sites. In case you're not aware, there are 17 heritage sites in Kyoto. Yep, that's a lot. But that's what makes Kyoto so unique. Now, welcome to the neighborhood of Pontulcho. This neighborhood is a good example of how the landscape law changed the city's mood over the years. Pontulcho is a cute alleyway in Kyoto that spans over several blocks. If you look at this Google Street image from 2009 and this one from 2023, you'll see clear differences. For starters, the huge sign at the entrance of the alleyway is gone, and so are the wires hanging from the tops of the shops. The pavement was redone and the big store signs disappeared. It's much cleaner. At night, the alleyway turned into the perfect spot for atmospheric dining, since its legislation decided to rule over the type of lighting allowed in the neighborhood. This is what it looks like at nighttime. Hey, you fancy grabbing some sushi? I can't help thinking that this landscape law contributed a lot to Japan's minimalist architecture. Although images like these ones in Tokyo are far from the idea we have of this minimalist aesthetic, Kyoto falls right into place with it. How about we take a quick look inside one of these establishments? The Starbucks we mentioned earlier also invested in turning its interior design local. It's the first ever Starbucks where you can drink tea on a tatami floor. You can sit cross-legged, like many Japanese people do, and enjoy a delicious hot beverage. I must say I quite like the new Kyoto. How about you?
A colossal iceberg, more giant than a city, broke away from Antarctica in mid-2021. It's so big that it's 40 times bigger than Paris and 73 times the size of Manhattan. Imagine that you come out of your small holiday shack on the coast of South Africa, near the town of Port Elizabeth. You have a cup of tea in your hand as you've just woken up. You stand near the edge of your lookout, the vast Indian Ocean before you. Something catches your eye. To the right, there is something so monumental, you can't comprehend it. It's a giant slab of ice, 300 feet high, and stretching away many miles, as far as the eye can see. It rolls slowly, but relentlessly on, heading out into the deep sea. If it goes far enough, it could reach the western coast of Australia. Playing in front of it are a pod of dolphins, like they sometimes do off the bow of a ship. Yet they're just specks compared to the mammoth size. You're so shocked that you drop your cup. Your eyes are as big as saucers. It's like something out of a science fiction movie. Are you dreaming? Are you seeing things? Nope. It's A76. It's real, and it's currently on the move. What could happen to it is anyone's guess. Well, scientists have a few theories, but let's get a grasp of its size first. The iceberg is 110 miles long and 16 miles wide. It's basically the shape of a gigantic finger. If you were standing at the coast of Dover, looking across the English Channel toward France, the iceberg would be almost as wide. The channel is 21 miles across at its narrowest. That means approximately 2/3 of that distance would be filled with the iceberg. That's if it were drifting finger pointing down, so to speak. If it were facing the other way, it could still enter the English Channel, but as it got closer to the narrowest points, it would smash into the coasts of both England and France. It would go up over land. It would slide over the green fields of England, the white ice bold against the rich green. It would cruise past the vineyards of France. It was temporarily lowering the temperature of everything around it. Those grapes would be like jelly crystals. It would skim right over highways, cars stopping to observe this colossal thing, like a visitor from another galaxy. You could pluck chunks off it for your drink as it sailed past. Failing that, you could scale it and go ice climbing, right on the outskirts of London. It would certainly be handy in the summer. But let's get back to what actually happened, and what scientists think will happen to it. As of the beginning of 2022, A76 is the world's most giant floating iceberg. It was calved from the Filchner Ronne ice shelf in Antarctica in the middle of May 2021. Ice calving, also known as glacier calving, is the breaking up of ice chunks from the edge of a glacier. It then pulls away from the ice mass into a separate entity. If you were nearby, you would hear a lot of cracking and a massive booming sound. Blocks of ice up to 200 feet would break free and crash into the water. It would cause huge waves. Not even adventurous surfers would want to tackle those breakers. Ice calving is a natural event. The area where A76 broke off has seen little change in recent decades. There have been even larger chunks of ice than A76, but this one is currently the largest in the world. Scientists at the British Antarctic Survey spotted it. There are satellite images of it breaking free, as captured by the European Space Agency's Sentinel-1A satellite. The size at the calving was an estimated 1,670 square miles. Right now, it's in the Weddell Sea around Antarctica. The Weddell Sea is part of the Southern Ocean. It was named after the Scottish sailor James Weddell, who entered the area in 1823. Scientists have deemed the Weddell Sea to have the clearest water of any sea. Imagine peering down into its depths from a boat. What a fantastic view it must be. The area is full of whales and seals. As you look down, you may see killer whales, humpback whales, minke whales, leopard seals, and crab-eater seals. And if you look towards land, you'll likely see a colony of Adelie penguins. They're the dominant penguin species in this area because they adapt to the harsh environment. In fact, this is the only location in the world they live. What an incredible array of wildlife to observe, all from the comfort of the ship's deck, while you drink another cup of hot tea. It gets pretty cold in these parts. To get an idea of what could happen to A76, scientists refer to other data, such as the even more enormous iceberg called A68. It was calved from the ice shelf known as Larsen C off Antarctica in 2017. While it may be exciting, though a little daunting, to think of it also sailing up the English Channel, A68 floated out to warmer seas and, by early 2021, had all but dissipated. That was a relatively quick demise. Some icebergs have been observed floating around for up to 18 years. Suppose they remain in the relatively cold waters. It all depends on where A76 decides to go. Satellites have helped scientists keep track of these monstrous movements, whereas they would go unnoticed in the past. That's how they know that by day 148, this iceberg had split into 3 fragments, imaginatively titled A76A, A76B, and A76C. The numbers might be boring, but they're based on the Antarctic quadrant in which they were first sighted. If these enormous chunks do break up entirely, it will not add to rising sea levels because it was already part of the floating ice shelf. Imagine these ice chunks in your glass. They already take up a certain amount of space. They will simply change form into water. Icebergs like this one are different from glaciers or ice sheets found on land. Those are the things that help to raise sea levels when they break off and melt. For example, if the whole of Antarctica's ice sheet were to melt, it could raise sea levels by nearly 190 feet. If you think A76 is enormous, and it clearly is, there was another that makes it look small in comparison. On record, the largest iceberg was sighted in November of 1956, 150 miles west of Scott Island in the South Pacific Ocean. Ironically, it was seen by a ship known as the USS Glacier. It was sized over 12,000 square miles. This iceberg was larger than the country of Belgium. What may happen to the chunks of A76 will depend on a few factors. Ocean currents can make a significant impact, and wind direction and speed can too. They may move closer to coastlines, where they can freeze into pack ice. They can also drift into shallow waters and hit the seabed, called seabed gouging. The deepest part of the iceberg can act like the keel of a boat. It digs into the ocean floor, but the sheer size of the iceberg keeps it moving. Soon it's tearing up the floor, creating a long, narrow furrow or a gouge. Fish would scatter, the earth would shake, the noise would be tremendous. It's actually quite common in offshore environments near where ice is found. You would not want to be scuba diving nearby when one of these rips through. However, it would make for a spectacular sight. Generally, icebergs deteriorate through melting and fracturing, which, as you can imagine, changes the mass and the surface area. Combined with wind and ocean currents, it can make iceberg modeling difficult. As for A76, we'll just have to wait and see. Before we go, let's return to our imaginary voyage down the English Channel. The island of ice, 73 times the size of Manhattan, with its gigantic frosty finger pointed down toward the Celtic Sea, rolling steadily onwards, unable to be stopped. Hundreds of thousands of people have flocked to the coasts of both England and France to watch this extraordinary spectacle as it cruises by. On top of the ice, there are thousands of penguins playing happily. They almost look to be waving back to the abundance of sightseers who cheer them on their way, the children jumping with joy at the most spectacular sight they've ever witnessed.
So, you want to get as close to the moon as possible without leaving Earth? Easy. Hop on a plane to Ecuador and climb Mount Chimborazo. I know, it may sound weird, but hear me out. Now, Everest is the tallest mountain when you're measuring from sea level, but Chimborazo's peak is actually the closest spot on Earth to the moon. Here's the physics behind it. Mount Everest is over 29,000 feet tall, and Chimborazo is only around 20,000 feet. But the secret lies in how far they are from the Earth's core. You see, Earth is not a perfect sphere. It's chubby in the middle and slightly squished at the top and the bottom. The chubby part in the middle is called the equator. FYI, the country Ecuador actually translates to equator in Spanish. Now you know. The mountain we're talking about, Chimborazo, is located a few degrees from the equator line. So since the squishy sphere is chubbier in the middle part, Chimborazo's peak sticks out farther into space. This means that if you hike all the way up to this mountain's peak, you'll be a smidge closer to the moon than if you hike all the way up Mount Everest. In the North Sea, off the coast of England, there's a tiny platform bobbing around, roughly the size of 2 tennis courts. You might think it's an oil platform, but this is Sealand, the world's tiniest country. The Ruff's Tower platform was built during the first half of the 20th century as a fort to protect English ships. Jump to the 1960s when a guy named Paddy Roy Bates decided to claim this old fort as his own country, naming it the Principality of Sealand. Paddy gave his country everything it deserved: a national flag, currency, a constitution, stamps, and a hoisting swing system. That's how you get into the country, by the way, hoisted all the way up to the upper part of the platform. Today, this micronation is headed by ruling monarch Michael Bates, who is a member of the country's self-proclaimed royalty. I know, right? Why wait in line for the British throne? The nation has its own fan club, who cheer for the country's national soccer club. Their team competes in international tournaments where they usually play with other tiny nations. Although Sealand only has one official resident as of right now, players from other countries join to help out their soccer team. One of the country's supporters also placed a Sealand flag on top of Mount Everest. Having your kitchen in one country and your living room in another, well, this is the daily reality for some locals in Barle. In this town, the border between Belgium and the Netherlands doesn't just run along streets, it slices right through buildings. So, to navigate this setup, a rule was made that a house's nationality is determined where its front door is located. But this solution created its own problems. There's a house where the front door is exactly on the border, giving it two addresses, one in Belgium and one in the Netherlands. The owners of this house were given a unique opportunity. They could choose which country they'd like to get their utilities from, like gas and water. And you guessed it, they picked the country where the stuff was cheaper, in this case, Belgium. Down in Senegal, Africa, there's a lake that looks like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. About 18 miles north of the capital, Dakar, you'll find Lake Retba, also known as La Rosa. This lake is famous for its bright pink water. Yes, it really is pink, and you can even take a swim if you're up for it. But be prepared, the water is super salty, one of the saltiest lakes in the world with salt levels over 40%. The pink color comes from a species of tiny algae. These algae produce red pigments that reflect sunlight, giving the lake its unique shade. If you want to see the lake at its brightest pink, visit during the dry season from November to June. The rainwater during other times of the year can wash away some of the color. Oh, by the way, there are other pink lakes around the world, like Lake Hillier in Western Australia and Lake Natron in Tanzania. So there's a hill that seems to be on fire all the time. Located in the Arctic region of Canada, the Smoking Hills are a truly unique sight on Earth. Some of the minerals found here are so rare that they've only been spotted on Mars. For at least a couple of hundred years, the ground here has been smoking continuously. At first, explorers thought this was due to an active volcano, but it turns out the smoke comes from something else. The soil in the Smoking Hills contains sulfur and coal, and when these materials mix with oxygen, they can spontaneously catch fire and keep on burning. But don't get any adventurous ideas about visiting. The environment here is extremely harsh, there's toxic smoke, and the temperatures can be dangerously high. So, I'd try Orlando. New Zealand is famous for its stunning landscapes, but it also has a hidden treasure underground. Deep in some caves in the country's North Island, you can find a mesmerizing natural wonder. To see it, you'll need to go down about 150 feet in a series of dark, twisting caves. As you go deeper, you'll enter complete darkness until you reach the cave ceilings, which are lined with tiny glowing creatures. These are New Zealand's native glowworms, which are the larvae of a special type of fungus gnat found only in this country. They shine a bright blue light to attract prey. If you get a chance to tour these caves, it feels like floating through a galaxy, with thousands of these living stars sparkling above and their glow reflecting in the water beneath your boat. It's an incredible sight, like stepping into a magical glowing world. Mexico is home to one of the most amazing caves in the world, called the Cave of Crystals. If you think you've seen big crystals before, wait until you see these. In around 1910, miners in the town of Nica, Chihuahua, yeah, like the dog, discovered a cave full of clear selenite crystals. But it wasn't until 90 years later that they found an even more incredible cave filled with enormous crystals, some as long as 39 feet and weighing up to 55 tons. Scientists believe that 26 million years ago, give or take, hot, mineral-rich water filled this cave, allowing these huge crystals to grow. The Nica crystals are thought to be the biggest in the world, making people standing next to them look teeny in comparison. However, exploring the cave isn't easy. Inside, temperatures reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit. Even with protection, people can only stay inside for 20 to 30 minutes. It's an extraordinary place, but not exactly a comfortable one for humans. Mauritius is famous for its beautiful beaches and clear blue waters. But it also has a stunning optical illusion at its southwest corner that looks like an underwater waterfall. Even though it seems like water is flowing down into the ocean, what you're actually seeing is a trick of the light and the seafloor. The island is on an ocean shelf that's only about 500 feet deep, but just beyond the edge, it drops down to 2.5 miles deep. This drop creates the illusion of a waterfall as currents push sand and particles over the edge, making it look like water is cascading down. So, while it's not a real underwater waterfall, it's definitely a cool sight to see from a boat. Now here's a place that might either give you chills or leave you in awe, depending on when you visit. Near the small town of Grafino in Poland, there's a forest of pine trees with a strange twist. They're all bent at their bases. During the day, these trees with their sharp 90-degree curves look fascinating and even a bit whimsical. You might even find a comfortable spot to sit on if you're having a picnic. But visit the crooked forest at night, and it takes on a whole different vibe. A thin layer of fog hangs around, making the forest look eerie and a bit spooky. Plus, scientists still don't know why for sure the trees are bent like this. So, would you prefer to see it in the bright light of day or the mysterious dark of night? Ooh. Now, when you think of Norway, things that come to mind are the sun that never sets in the summer, unbelievable nature, the fact that it's one of the happiest countries in the world, even white bears that freely roam in the wild. I'm guessing they're happy too. Already planning your trip to this dream country? Well, don't rush. You'll have to review your budget. Fuel there is 10 to 15% more expensive than in other Western European countries. A meal at a cafe for one person will cost at least $30. Plus, consider yourself lucky if you manage to find a hotel at $100 a night. If you Google the most expensive country in the world, you'll see this list. Switzerland, which is meanishly expensive. The United States, duh, been there, know that. Luxembourg is not a surprise either. And then, all of a sudden, you see Norway. Just so you know, a family of 4 would need over $4,000 a month just to exist in Norway. And it doesn't even include rent. Specialists say that Norway is around 7% more expensive than in the US. Norway is a bit weird though. Usually the richest countries have national currencies that are stronger than the US dollar. Take Swiss francs, for example, or the Kuwaiti dinar, which is literally the boss when it comes to currencies. Like one Kuwaiti dinar can snag you $3.25 US. Now, here's where the mismatch comes. The Norwegian krona is dubbed the weakest currency in the West. Well, how come? In the wild world of global currencies, the Norwegian krona used to be a tough player known for smart money moves. But surprisingly, it is now the weakest currency in the West, taking a big hit in the last decade. It has fallen hard against the US dollar and euro, causing concern for central banks and money folks worldwide. The oil price roller coaster is a major factor in the krona's struggle, as Norway relies heavily on oil exports. But even with oil prices relatively high, it remains historically weak against major currencies. The weak Norwegian krona is affecting everyday folks too, with prices rising on almost everything due to heavy imports. Inflation is growing, leading to interest rate hikes by the Norges Bank. High interest rates are hurting the housing market and making life more expensive for Norwegian citizens. So, one of the supposed reasons for why Norway is so expensive might be weak national currency. What else is particular about Norway? Well, climate for sure. It may be hard to imagine a freezingly cold country plunging into riches. It's an imagery we usually see on social media with geotags Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or even Kuwait. And it makes sense to think now that all the riches are somewhere southward, as these places have strong oil-based economies and super strong currencies. But in reality, better economies in the south are a current trend. Ever wonder why cold countries seem to be raking in the cash while the hot nations are just hanging out? Turns out, those living in chilly climates had to hustle just to survive winter. Think building shelter, stockpiling food, and keeping that fire burning. Meanwhile, those basking in the sunshine had it a little easier with hunting and foraging year-round. This theory holds true even in the land down under. Sydney and Melbourne, the top dogs in Australia's wealth game, also happen to be some of the coldest cities, while Darwin, the warmest city, is lagging behind. Some might argue that this theory doesn't hold up when we look at ancient civilizations or modern hotspots like tropical Singapore. But hey, times change, and so does wealth generation. Back in the day, it was all about farming, but now it's more about industry and innovation. So, Norway may seem to have been bound to get rich historically and geographically. Still, it's not exactly so. Norway used to struggle a lot. Back in the day, it faced some tough times with harsh winters and tricky geography. They even had famines that pushed families to seek a better life in the US. So, how did Norway go from rags to riches? Yep, oil and gas played a big role. The country is small, but it has around 0.31% of all oil reserves in the world. But in Norway, there's more to the story than just black gold. For example, the top oil reserve is not some Arabic country, but Venezuela, which claims up to 20% of the world's liquid gold. Still, Venezuela's economy is far from stable, so it's not all about oil. Although bested in forest size by other European nations, Norway was an unrivaled powerhouse in lumber during the Age of Sail. Thanks to its strategic fjord path, timber from its inland forests could quickly reach fjordside mills and global markets. As railroads unlocked larger forest potential in other countries post the 19th century, Norway was Europe's timber king, bolstered by a world-class merchant fleet by the 20th century. The Norwegian timber wealth, coupled with early cooperative societal norms, spurred growth across several sectors, from agriculture to fishing and banking. Despite being labeled poor in the 19th century, Norway's GDP per capita outshone Eastern and Southern European nations. The nation's ascendancy continues beyond the discovery of its oil reserves. Norway is unique, with a small population but sprawling land. Despite its vastness, the Nordics are scattered and considered one of the most spacious countries globally. Much of the North's territory stretches beyond the Arctic Circle, offering harsh landscapes with thin topsoil covering the bedrock. The tough terrain in Norway, full of mountains and with a short growing season, limits arable land to only 2.2%, similar to Yemen. The scattered arable land in small valleys makes extensive farming impractical, a far cry from the efficient farming in the U.S. With a huge chunk of land and coastlines, but a small population, Norway makes some serious cash from its reserves. Plus, nature has been pretty kind to Norway, with rich fishing grounds, hydropower from rivers, and power from cold waters. And only then comes the little thing called oil. The late 50s saw a big discovery that changed everything for Norway's economy. Fast forward to today, and petroleum activities have been a major game changer for Norway, feeding its economic growth and funding its welfare state. But Norway didn't just sit back and watch the money flow in. They made smart moves, like creating a sovereign wealth fund to manage their oil wealth for the long haul. The fund sees some big bucks, currently standing at 1.7 billion Norwegian kroner, or over 160 million US dollars. Norway uses the interest from this fund to boost its annual budget, ensuring top-notch healthcare, education, and welfare for its citizens. And here's the kicker: Norway's not resting on its laurels. They're investing in sustainable technologies, like offshore wind power, to secure a bright future beyond oil and gas. Now, Norway may be expensive, but it can't compete with the world's costliest place to live, Monaco. It's almost 4 times more expensive than the global average. So, if you're looking to rub elbows with the rich and famous, look no further than Monaco. With property prices soaring to an average of over $50,000 per square meter in 2022, it's no wonder why this tiny country is a magnet for the la-di-da. However, there's a place that's particularly expensive for tourists, and I'm not talking about tourist traps. Neither Oslo nor Monaco can beat the prices in, well, take a second to make your guess. Ready? Welcome to Ashgabat, Turkmenistan's capital. A gallon of milk costs a whopping $15 US, while a standard internet subscription plan will set you back $168 US a month. Calm down, you're not poor, it's just an economic glitch. The reason for these prices is simple. The Turkmen national currency exchange rate in relation to dollars is fixed and never changes. $1 equals 3.5 manats, and has been so since 2015. Local prices in the local currency grew to inflation, making it not proportionate to prices in dollars. The exchange rate never changes. So if you live there, such prices don't seem to be extraordinary. But if you come with dollars, you're in for a pricey trip. The LaLaurie Mansion, located in the French Quarter of New Orleans, has a grim reputation. Its former owner, Madame Delphine McCarthy LaLaurie, was a wealthy socialite in the early 19th century. The urban legend says that she treated her workers very badly. One night on April 10, 1834, Madame LaLaurie's house began to burn. Madame and her family managed to escape, but she abandoned her workers. They were locked inside the house. The locals, outraged by her negligence, gathered around the house, broke some of its walls, and eventually stole the remaining possessions. After the fire, the LaLaurie family escaped to Paris. Another private mansion was built on this Louisiana land. But it's said that the ghosts of those workers are still trapped inside the property. They tend to bother living people demanding justice. Today, the house is private, but you can book a tour and hear this story in detail. By the way, the mansion and its notorious owner played a big part in the American Horror Story franchise, although they didn't actually film the series in that particular house. American actress and director Kathy Bates played Madame LaLaurie and showcased the quirky character of this famous woman. So you can check it out if you're not afraid. Our next creepy destination was also shown in a movie franchise, the Amityville Horror. The media says this Dutch colonial-style home is located in the village of Amityville in New York. George and Kathy Lutz bought this property in 1975 for $80,000. The low price was due to the tragedy that happened in the house 1 year before. One night, a young man named Ronnie DeFeo, who lived in the house, took the lives of all his family members. The Lutz family began to notice strange activities in the house, such as phantom odors, unreasonably low temperatures, and loud sounds of unknown origin. According to the Lutz family, one day they called a preacher to clear the grim vibes, but he felt very bad during the ritual and his hands started bleeding. The Lutzes fled the house in a rush. Their spooky story inspired the Amityville Horror, a book written by American author Jay Anson and several successful horror movies. Although the house was reconstructed, it still exists. However, its address has been changed to confuse the trail and prevent crowds of tourists from gathering around it. Do you recognize this seemingly cute house in Harrisville, Rhode Island? It's known as one of the most haunted houses in America. The property earned its notorious reputation after multiple people lost their lives in this house over the years. In 1970, the Perrons family began to live here, and according to the legend, an invisible being lived along with them. At first, the entity was playful, but then it started getting more sinister. The family members experienced physical attacks and unexplainable illnesses. They invited the famous mystery hunters, Ed and Lorraine Warren, to research this case, which later inspired a book and the movie The Conjuring, released in 2013. In 2019, the property was purchased by the Heisens family, who also investigated mysteries. They reported some weird stuff going on in the house too, and eventually developed a successful business on haunted tourism. They sold the property for nearly $1.5 million in 2022. Let's move on to Tennessee. The urban legend tells a creepy story that started in 1804. John Bell and his family moved to this peaceful-looking farm in North Carolina. At first, everything went well, but 13 years later, the family began to experience bone-chilling events. At first, they started seeing weird animal-like shadows around the farm. Soon, these mysterious guests began to whisper and eventually talk out loud. Some mysterious entity began to wake up the family at night with loud noises and attacks. It particularly bothered their young daughter, Betsy Bell. Invisible hands grabbed Betsy by the hair and hit her body. When she grew up and was about to get married, the entity did everything to break the engagement, saying that Betsy wouldn't be happy with her groom. Rumors about these scary events spread throughout the village, and the locals began to visit the farm, hoping to see it for themselves. They called the entity Bell Witch. Many years have passed, but the locals still believe that the phantom of the evil witch lives in these places and hides in a cave near the farm. Ohio is one of the most notoriously haunted states in the USA. One of its legendary spots is the Mansfield Reformatory, a former prison that supposedly hosts the country's most creepy entities. The prison is nearly 130 years old. It was closed in 1990 and soon gained fame, especially after becoming the filming location for The Shawshank Redemption. And since we're passing through Ohio, let's take a look at another spooky place. The Chippewa Lake Amusement Park used to attract many guests with its various rides, roller coasters, and iconic Ferris wheel. But in the 1970s, 100 years after opening, the park was forced to close. It happened due to poor maintenance and low attendance. The park has gone through multiple fires, so today it looks like a bunch of creepy ruins overgrown with shrubs and rust. Mark Twain had been living in this charismatic house in Hartford, Connecticut for about 17 years. In this period, he wrote both The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Today, this property serves as a museum that showcases the author's life. But it's also known for some mysterious phenomena. Multiple visitors reported hearing odd noises and seeing a phantom of a woman in white. The most haunted part of the house is the billiard room. Twain used to chill there a lot during his stay, and today, some visitors claim they can smell tobacco smoke as they pass through. Now, Pennsylvania has lots of terrifying tales to offer. Despite its chic appearance, this fancy mansion has been empty for a while now. Its owner, Peter Widener, finished the construction after losing his beloved wife, Hannah, during a tragic yacht trip. It happened at the end of the 19th century, and eventually, Widener lost multiple relatives in this house. He was wealthy enough to invest in the Titanic construction. Perhaps he was fascinated by the idea of an unsinkable ship. But unfortunately, both Peter's oldest son and grandson lost their lives when the Titanic sank. Eventually, the mansion was abandoned. But it's said that the phantoms of the Widener family are still there. And speaking of the Titanic, Molly Brown was one of the survivors. She got famous for rowing a lifeboat for about 7 hours before reaching a safe place. But Molly's own mansion in Denver gained a spooky reputation. She owned the haunted property together with her husband, who ran a mining business. Over the years, multiple people reported seeing phantoms of cats and human figures running down the staircase of the house. The witnesses of such visions insist that something spooky is definitely going on behind these walls. Today, the mansion operates as a museum, so you can go and see it for yourself. And how about meeting a creepy phantom while doing some casual shopping in Soho? The urban legend dates back to 1799. A young lady, Gulielma Elmore Sands, tried to escape with her lover, Levi Weeks. They were tenants in the same boarding house. Around 2 weeks later, her body was found at the bottom of a well in the building that today hosts a large retail store, COS. After the horrifying discovery, the police arrested Levi. Although he was acquitted, Sands' phantom is said to haunt the building as a warning to other ladies. The creepiest thing is that the well is still there, and shoppers can see it in the basement at the back of the men's department. Now brace yourself and welcome to the famous haunted toy store in Sunnyvale, California. The legend says that the land under the property used to be a plantation owned by Martin Murphy. He hired a preacher, Johnny Johnson, who fell in love with Murphy's daughter, Elizabeth. But she got engaged to a lawyer. Johnny's heart was broken, and he lost his life in an accident while chopping wood. Today, Johnny's phantom reportedly wanders around the Toys R Us store, still chasing his beloved Elizabeth. Customers and employees report seeing objects moving on their own, hearing mysterious footsteps, and even Johnny's whispers over the intercom system. Ooh. The Azores are 9 islands in the Atlantic Ocean, sitting about a third of the way from Europe to North America. A history textbook will tell you that the Portuguese explorers discovered this beautiful archipelago in the 15th century. Until then, they were uninhabited. The islands still belong to Portugal, so there seems to be no controversy or mystery here, except for the fact that some researchers think the Azores were home to an ancient civilization from thousands of years ago. Others support the idea that the famous Atlantis itself was here. In 2010, archaeologists announced that they found some structures on the islands which looked like they were from the Stone Age. If that's true, It would mean that there was a civilization back then which was advanced enough to travel this far and settle on the remote islands. A special scientific commission studied the matter and concluded that those structures were natural rock formations or had a more modern origin. So the first settlers were supposed to have been the Portuguese. It didn't stop some enthusiastic scientists from further research. They analyzed the DNA of mice from the Azores and found that it had the same genetic characteristics as house mice from northern Europe. The little rodents couldn't have sailed this far without humans, so it looks like the first people had arrived at the Azores before the Portuguese, and the plot thickens. Dr. Felix Rodriguez, who works at the University of the Azores, is determined to find out exactly when it happened. He's studying the megalithic structures found in the Azores. Similar structures found in Western Europe and the Mediterranean date back to the Neolithic age. According to Dr. Rodriguez, the oldest findings are from 4,200 years ago. It's not clear when civilizations left them. The professor identified 7 megalithic structures in one complex as dolmens for the deceased. The cavities are all cylindrical in shape and definitely don't look like a natural formation. The material from the cavities turned out to be at least 2,500 years old. There are also some pieces of ceramics that seem to be even older. It looks like the rocks in the area had been lifted. You can see it by the small waves left by lava. It's thick and sticky, so it can't leave vertical marks. Someone must have moved the rock from its horizontal position. Another interesting finding is some stone anchors with holes found by the sea. Similar ones were used in the Mediterranean and on the Atlantic coast of Europe, dating back to 1000 and 2000 BCE. The 15th century Portuguese were advanced sailors and never used stone anchors, only metal ones. The scientists also managed to find a structure built right in the volcanic tuff. It looks somewhat similar to the ones built in the Mediterranean that are at least 2,000 years old. These structures are called columbariums and were used to store the ashes of the deceased. They also found something resembling an oven next to it, so they could be a part of one complex. There's also a basin in the middle, and it's not the only one on the island. It looks like they had a special meaning to their builders. There are channels around the construction. They connect the 4 basins, and the sun lights each of them at different times of the year. It was all carefully planned, as they were lit the brightest during winter and summer solstices and autumn and spring equinoxes. The water passed through all the basins and went directly into the sea. It could have been a purifying ritual. Now, some people are skeptical about the findings and believe they're all parts of a fortress from the 16th century. Professor Rodriguez is determined to prove it's all much, much older. There must have been some ancient civilization here that could have left because of the volcanoes that go crazy every 50 years. Antonietta Costa, a postdoctoral student at the University of Porto in Portugal, is also sure that the first people came to the Azores in prehistoric times. She has studied standing stones with small openings, explained as cuts for quarrying the stones. Costa believes they are part of a calendar system. She noticed that none of the slits in the rocks were aligned with the cardinal east direction. The slits closest to it are smaller than the ones facing other directions, so it can't be just a coincidence. It also looks like the slits are aligned with the solstices, and that's what makes Costa think it could be a calendar. She also thinks the inscriptions left on slabs of bedrock on the islands are much like those maps that were left on the rocks during the Stone Age in mainland Europe. Another interesting theory about the Azores is that it could have been the location of the famous Atlantis, which was lost under the sea. Since the Azores archipelago is in the middle of an ocean, it could technically be a perfect place for that. A 20th century scholar quoted Plato to prove this theory was right. The Greek philosopher suggested that Atlantis was in between the continents. The coins and sculptures supposedly found in the Azores when the Portuguese just arrived also point that there was someone else present there. And way more recently, in 2013, a sailor found a huge structure looking like a pyramid off the Azores coast. It was most likely a large submarine volcano, but it's much cooler to think it was some big deal in Atlantis, right? Peru has its own mystery. Amid the desert, you can find some eerie marks called the Nazca lines. They're known as geoglyphs and were created more than 2,000 years ago by the people of the Nazca culture. Thanks to a dry climate and strong winds in the desert, most of the Nazca lines have reached our day. To create them, Nazca people removed the top layer of the pebbles and revealed the soil beneath the ground. The color of the soil changes from reddish-brown to yellowish-gray, so the lines always look different. Most of the geoglyphs depict plants and animals. You can clearly see a monkey, a whale, a condor, a hummingbird, a spider, various flowers, trees, and other plants. There are also some geometric shapes, such as triangles, trapezoids, and spirals. Since they were discovered in the 1920s, scientists have offered different explanations for the lines. Some say that in Nazca culture, people ascribe special significance to these motifs, so they probably created these shapes for deities in the sky to see. Others believe they were a sort of astronomical calendar, and animal sketches were modeled after groups of stars. This theory was proved wrong, so the purpose of the lines remains a mystery. Another place that leaves many questions is Nimrut Mountain in Turkey. This mountain has a complex of monuments with temples and tombs. It was built by the Kingdom of Commagene, which ruled here around the 1st century BCE. There are statues of King Antiochus, 2 lions, 2 eagles, Zeus, Hercules, and Apollo. Archaeologists found the ruins of this complex at the end of the 19th century. They thought it had been built by the Assyrians. Then, some of the most famous scientists of the time came here and found an inscription in Greek. It had details about the sculptures and the names of important members of the Commagene royal family. It looked like it had been put there for future visitors. The scientists established that the statues used to be full-size figures. Changes in temperature, strong winds, snow, and the bright sun didn't leave them a chance to last in all their original glory. Plus, the complex is in an earthquake zone, so all you can see now is mostly the heads of the statues. They look incredibly complex and large for their time. The biggest question is, how did the people who lived thousands of years ago manage to create such huge sculptures on top of the mountain? It's obvious that they worked on shaping the limestone blocks up there and not on the ground. So, stay tuned, we'll keep an eye on this. Dubai is glamorous by design. In 1966, this fellow went all out to transform a sleepy fishing village into a shiny metropolis brimming with skyscrapers. It was all founded on oil money. Investors and expats started pouring into the city year by year. And now, Dubai houses indoor ski resorts, outdoor water parks, drone-controlled weather, futuristic gardens, and floating tennis courts. But is everything as bright as it seems? The city is built on shifting sands in a desert where temperatures can exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Could Dubai be that catastrophic cautionary tale waiting to happen? It might be, or it might not. Let's find out. Well, one of the most questionable projects of this emirate might indeed be in danger. I'm talking about Dubai's artificial islands off the coast. Built from sand dragged up from the seabed, they're part of a super ambitious plan to create resorts and residential homes for the ultra-rich. But at the moment, most of these islands are largely abandoned, and their market collapsed. And the worst thing? Well, no one expected such an outcome. They're already sinking back into the sea. Let's take a closer look at these wonder islands. There are the 3 Palm Islands, Palm Jumeirah, Palm Jebel Ali, and Palm Deira, an archipelago of 300 small islands called the World, and a final set of tiny islands designated after constellations, the Universe. The construction started in the year 2000 with the Palm Islands. The main goal was to create one more oasis within the oasis of Dubai, with more shops and more luxury goods, more resorts and hotels, more restaurants, and more beaches. The Palm Islands, for example, have mansion-like houses built in contemporary styles within gated communities. It turns out they're meant to mimic the Hollywood Hills lifestyle. At the moment, Palm Jumeirah is the most developed one out of all of them and has functioning businesses, homes, and hotels.
The other two Palm Islands are reported to be rather underdeveloped, if not desolate. As for the Universe archipelago, it hasn't even gotten underway, but at the same time, it's supposed to be finished by 2028. The World archipelago has been encountering one issue after another during its development. The problems were mostly related to using sand from the ocean to build the islands. Erosion from water and wind started eating away at the islands from day one. But that's not the only problem. To make matters worse, rising ocean levels are threatening to swallow them completely. Plus, economic problems that started in 2008 haven't let up yet. But let's delve into details to see how truly disastrous the whole venture is. Palm Jumeirah, the only successful set of islands so far, is literally sinking at a rate of 5 millimeters per year. It turns out that sand piled on the ocean floor isn't all that great for sustaining the weight of hundreds and thousands of tons of human-made structures. So, Dubai's islands sink, the ocean level rises, that's clear. But couldn't the engineers behind these magnificent projects predict such an outcome? Apparently not. Wave breakers surrounding the islands have a height of a mere 6.5 feet. That's well below any serious protective height. Water erosion also removes between 353,000 to 530,000 cubic feet of sand per year. And these numbers are going to grow as global warming makes weather and ocean tides more severe. We should also mention the ecological problems the construction of the islands provoked. For one thing, in the process, too many natural resources were used, which led to the decline of biodiversity and the extinction of wildlife and vegetation. The islands are extremely harmful to marine life and the ecosystem. Dubai uses loads and loads of energy and natural resources. The average water consumption in Dubai in 2019 was 145 gallons per person per day, the highest consumption rate of any country. 98% of this water comes from desalination plants, which uses a tremendous amount of fossil fuels. Plus, the extensive use of marine sand and sediment to build the islands had catastrophic consequences for the local ecosystem. During the construction, the waters became clouded with silt, stifling once abundant sea inhabitants. For example, oyster beds have been covered with 2 inches of sediment. Now, let's have a closer look at one of the projects, the World Islands, and find out the deepest secrets behind them. The construction was launched in the early 2000s. Since then, the project has been surrounded by a veil of rumors, from celebrity purchases to outlandish hotel projects. For many years, the chances of completion seemed slim after the islands were left mostly abandoned following the financial crisis in 2008. One of the UAE's most ambitious projects almost turned into a ghost town. At the same time, Dubai's reputation as a luxury vacation destination and investment hub has been growing, and it had its impact on the once abandoned World Islands. For example, global hotel group Anantara opened the doors to a 70-room resort called Anantara World Islands Dubai Resort. Don't you think it gives a new buzz of hope for this destination? So, what exactly are the World Islands? They sit around 2.5 miles off the coast of Dubai in the Persian Gulf. It's a collection of small islands replicating the world in miniature. Each island has its own name corresponding to a certain country. The archipelago was created by Dubai-based company Nakheel Projects. The name is linked to many high-profile projects, including the St. Regis Dubai and the Palm. The artificial islands were built by pulling sand from the Gulf and moving it to the designated spot. Several million tons of rock were used to keep it in place. In total, there are 300 islands, and each is from 250 to 900 square feet. At this point, more than $14 billion have already been spent on the construction. The developers had to deal with a lot in the process. Besides the chaos of work halting, there were also rumors that the World Islands were sinking back into the ocean. For many, the Heart of Europe project was the most convincing. Its development will see a certain number of the islands in the world transformed into the continent of Europe. It's planned to be done to such an extent that fake weather conditions with rain and snow might be created in some areas. The heart of Europe includes the construction of several luxurious hotels, private mansions, and even floating villas. Each of these villas is designed to transport people to different European destinations, including Venice, Sweden, Monaco, and Germany. This ambitious project is still under development, and the group is looking for potential investors. But the most exciting World Islands project is probably the Antero World Islands Dubai Resort that I mentioned before. Located in the South America region of the islands and having a great view over the main city, it opened in 2021. The resort's accommodations include suites, beach villas, and pool villas. At the moment, it's the only open resort on the entire archipelago, which gives it a sense of seclusion and privacy. Interestingly, the development and purchase opportunities remain a closely guarded secret. There was an old listing on one internet site for the entire collection back to when the World Islands was just an intriguing project. But later, there was only one individual island left for sale. Which island it wasn't disclosed, but the listing advertised it as a 505,000 square foot undeveloped island, and the price they wanted for it was $16 million. It may seem like a hefty sum considering the problems associated with the World Islands project, but the islands may easily increase in value if the Antero Resort lives up to everyone's expectations. By the way, if you want to own a piece of the World Islands but can't find any for sale, look into private purchase opportunities within the heart of Europe. This project offers investors the opportunity to buy either a second home on one of its resort islands, including luxury mansions and villas, or an incredibly exclusive private island. I wonder, what about grocery shopping? As far as I know, the infrastructure is lacking there. I mean, do they even have DoorDash? Or do you have to walk all the way to the nearest luxury hotel to have breakfast? On the other hand, considering the price you're paying for property there, splurging on breakfast shouldn't be your biggest concern.
Fraser Island sits off the coast of sunny Queensland, Australia. But don't fall for its beauty. It's home to the most dangerous beach in the world. There's nowhere on the island to seek medical attention. If you do run into danger, you're on your own. Dingo attacks are super common here. If you don't know what a dingo is, it looks like an adorable dog. But beware, this wild breed is extremely dangerous. And the dingo's gnashing teeth aren't the only thing to be scared of. The seas around the island are swimming with great white sharks. There's jellyfish in the water too. Fraser Island is home to some of the world's most dangerous kinds, including the Portuguese bluebottle. One sting from its venomous tentacle is enough to take down an adult human. Even if you manage to avoid the creatures on the island, the sea itself is perilous. The waters are incredibly rough and have powerful riptides. These are strong currents that will pull you away from the shore. And remember, there are no lifeguards to come to your rescue if you get in trouble. Even the sand is dangerous. Car rollovers in the thick dunes happen all the time. It's definitely best to swap your car for a dune buggy. Travelers also often drive down the dunes straight into the lakes below, but the lakes are incredibly shallow, which is not very safe. Fraser Island is also known for its beautiful lookout points, but you'll need to watch your step. You might feel on top of the world, but stay well away from the edges as jagged rocks and crashing waves line the shore below. There's an island in Brazil known as Snake Island, which is equally dangerous. I wonder what the hazard could be here. It's home to thousands of golden lancehead vipers, which are one of the most venomous snakes on the planet. They grow to over 20 inches long, and their fast-acting venom melts the flesh from around their bites. There are around 4,000 snakes on the tiny 106-acre isle. Snake Island has become so dangerous that the Brazilian authorities had to ban everyone from going there. For years, the only human inhabitants to brave the island were a lighthouse keeper and his family. But local legend says that one night a group of snakes crawled in through a window to attack, and the family was never seen again. Known as the Gas Mask Town, the island of Miyakijima is not one to visit in a hurry. It's home to a fiery, active volcano that has erupted several times over the past few years. There were several massive eruptions leading to the spread of a highly poisonous gas across the island. Residents are now required to carry gas masks at all times, and a terrifying alarm blares across the island whenever the poison levels get too high. The island is also in the middle of the Devil's Sea. Ships mysteriously vanish in the area, and experts have no idea why. The North Sentinel Island is home to a remote and unwelcoming tribe. They lived alone on the island without any modern technology or contact with the outside world for over 60,000 years. And that's just the way they like it. They've been known to fire arrows at anyone who attempts to enter the island. There are many stories of people visiting the island, and they are never seen again. It's not ghoulish ghosts or slithering snakes that you have to worry about on the Caribbean island of Saba. It's hurricanes. The tiny island has been hit by more severe hurricanes than anywhere in the world over the last 150 years. There have even been 7 tropical cyclones, which is an intense circular storm. The winds in these storms can reach 254 kilometers an hour. Try standing up in that. You'll also struggle to find a pilot who'll even land on the island. It's incredibly dangerous not because of the winds, but because it's home to the shortest runway in the world. It's only 440 yards long. 2 huge rocky ridges surround the runway, so there's no room for mistakes. The Kilauea beaches of Hawaii used to be one of the most dangerous in the world. The Kilauea volcano has been almost consistently erupting for the past 35 years, spewing red-hot lava into the surrounding waters. The water temperatures have even passed boiling point as a result of the lava. Happily, it's no longer active. While the island of Bikini Atoll might sound like the perfect summer vacation destination, it's most certainly not. The problem is that this place has dangerously high radiation levels, and the locals had to leave it. Although the island was declared safe in the 90s, its original inhabitants have refused to return. The lack of fishing in the area has also led to a massive increase in sharks who swim the waters in search of their next meal. Strangely, the corals and reefs are thriving. From the distance, Ramree Island looks idyllic. White sand, swaying palms. But beware. They say thousands of hungry saltwater crocodiles used to lurk there, ready to strike at any time. The exact number of those animals was unknown, and some scientists claim that there are quite a few of them right now. I'd stay well clear of the island though. I don't really feel like becoming crocodile food. Skeleton Coast in Namibia is appropriately named as the harsh landscape and lack of water make life almost impossible. Whale carcasses, turtle shells, and elephant rib cages litter the shore. If that isn't bad enough, lions and hyenas patrol the beach in search of their next meal. The surrounding waters are just as dangerous, as they are home to 11 different species of shark. Many sailors have become lost on this coast and have never been seen again. Cape Tribulation in Australia also lives up to its name as it is packed, full of dangers. Swimmers have to wear special stinger suits because the water is teeming with stinging jellyfish. Saltwater crocodiles also hide in the water, but they don't make a suit to keep you safe from those. It's not just the jellyfish that sting. The area is covered in stinging trees. The trees have jagged leaves that give the crocs' teeth a run for their money. On land, there's angry cassowary birds. There are flightless birds that are the same size as an ostrich. They have sharp talons that can easily slice through skin. The Oddities beach in Norway is one of the best places to see the northern lights, but you'll be lucky if you survive more than one night there. The seas surrounding the island can reach 46 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's just in the summer. It probably feels like swimming in ice cream. For years, Gansby Beach has remained a habitat for the most dangerous creatures on the planet. Sharks are particular fans of its waters, and the coastal stretch is known as the Great White Shark Capital. The sharks are attracted to the 60,000 sea lions that flock to the beach every year. Not just shark food, wild sea lions can be unpredictable and aggressive towards humans. Komoro Islands are the worst vacation destination for those who don't really like mosquitoes. The place is swarming with the little guys. Locals say all the water on the island must be contaminated because of them. So they like to sterilize water before drinking, making ice, and even brushing their teeth. If you're really into coconuts, there's one place you should probably go to grab some. I'm talking Danger Island. Yep, it's the real name of one of the islands in the Chagos archipelago. It shouldn't scare you off though. The major problem it has is parking. I mean, safe anchorage for those who come there. Finally, while it may sound dreamy, you're probably going to want to avoid the beaches of the Amazon. Sharp-toothed red-bellied piranhas, anacondas, and electric eels are just some of the beach's regular residents. It has one of the widest varieties of animal species on the planet, including the Amazonian giant centipede, which has a poisonous bite. It's not just the animals of the Amazon that you have to watch out for. Strychnos and curare are the two Amazonian plants that are super poisonous.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.